If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 26, The Messy Room. The Room of Lost Things, also known as the Room of Requirement or the Room of Come and Go, was a place that has been used by Hogwarts house elves for almost a millennia. Harry passed by a shelf filled with all sorts of items and placed with no obvious order whatsoever. He could glimpse books, magazines, individual shoes, underwear, broken toys, an empty bottle of shampoo, and a very ominous potion vial with some pitch-black liquid inside. Apparently, the elves have been using this room to store all the garbage left behind by former students and teachers for the last 9 centuries. Harry spat his complaints as he walked. He had come here, not just to find Ravenclaw's diadem but to also find a few items he could sell. After his first week of training, Harry had come to realize something. His best chance to regain his old form in a reasonable time frame was to make use of magical rituals and artifacts. His goal was to do more than just reach his previous peak. He wanted to surpass his old level of power and reach new heights, so he could be prepared for any eventuality that his enemies could come up with. During his previous life, by the time he had acquired much of his knowledge about rituals and magical artifacts, the world was very much in ruins. Demons' first targets had been the magical communities like Diagon Alley, so resources became very scarce, and finding the rare ingredients necessary for these rituals was impossible. I won't let that happen again. He clenched his fists. Lucky for him, this world was still intact and filled with all the resources he could possibly need. Resources he planned to use, but for that, he will need large sums of money. I can't sell any of this trash. He looked around the shelves. By the look of things, the elves refused to throw anything away, storing everything left behind with no exceptions. Of course, most of the things that people left or forgot ended up being trash, meant to be disposed of, but the elves do not have the same standard as humans for what constitutes trash, so they stored everything. They are like tiny magical hoarders, but I am sure there has to be. Wait, what is that? His eyes were drawn to a broom resting against one of the busy shelves. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary broom, but someone who was knowledgeable about flying brooms could recognize the very particular construction of the broom was consistent with a specific brand. That's definitely a Nimbus, and a very old model at that. He picked it up to get a closer look and read the letters engraved on the wood. A Nimbus 100? That's one of the first models ever produced. This is a collector's item. This finding gave him an idea. This place was full of old things that could be valuable as collector items nowadays, like old brooms, books, or even vintage clothes. It's going to take a while to sort through all this stuff, but I should be able to make enough money by selling antique items from here. And if that is not enough, I have other ideas. For a moment, he wished to have the help of a house elf, as it would make things so much simpler. But he could not possibly use his family elf, as this one would report everything to his parents. All right, let's leave that for now and get on with the other reason for my visit. He lifted his wand and focused his mind on the object he wanted. Oxio Ravenclaw's diadem. He waited, hoping to hear some noises as they came towards him, but nothing happened. Harry frowned but was not ready to give up just yet. Oxio Horcrux. Oxion Voldemort Horcrux. Oxio Rowena Ravenclaw belongings. Oxio Tom Marvolo Riddle belongings. Nothing. This was the worst case scenario and another evidence that despite its many similarities, this was a very different world. This is very bad. Maybe he stored them in different locations, maybe he didn't even create the Horcruxes in the first place, and there is no way for me to know. There are other ways to protect one's life after all. He could only hope that Voldemort did not resort to demonology this time. I should still check the other places I know, just to be sure. If he has created Horcruxes, there is a good chance that one of them is in his old mansion, but with him still alive, that house will be much better protected. It would be a suicide to go right now. Harry thought hard for a while, but the possibilities were just too many and his information was lacking. One wrong move could be the end of his journey. For what little he knew, Death Eaters had not made any moves for years, until that attack on Diagon Alley. Hopefully, they will take it slow for a while. He could only hope for that at least. Even if he gathered all the necessary ingredients, it would not be possible to perform any rituals on himself. At this point, his body and magic were growing and were very unstable. A ritual would do more harm than good. He is going to need to wait for at least 2 more years before starting. By then, he will have enough control to complete everything safely. But I can't just wait and do nothing. I can think of a way to start acquiring some important information. He looked around the room of requirements with a thoughtful expression. Chapter 27, Flying Incident. On Monday afternoon, the first-year students were having their first flying lesson. All of them were standing next to their broom, as structured by Rolanda Hooch, the flying instructor of Hogwarts. Keep yourselves focused on the broom next to you and say up, loud and with conviction. The broom will listen to your magic and follow your commands. Everyone started to yell at the same time over and over. This is going to give me a headache. Harry covered his ears. He then took a glance at the broom he had been given for the class. It was a Cleansweeper 260, one of the cheapest brooms in the market, from 20 years ago, and it was in poor condition. Is the school budget in such dire straits already? Mr. Potter, is there something wrong? It looked like Professor Hooch had noticed that Harry was the only one in the class who wasn't even trying to lift the broom, so she decided to approach him. No, Professor. My apologies, I was merely a bit distracted. Then let's better focus on the matter at hand. Go on, give it a try, Mr. Potter. She urged him. Being left with no choice but to participate in the class, Harry opened his hand to pull the broom up and this one instantly flew into his grasp. What an impressive display! You may have your father's talents for flying after all, Mr. Potter. The professor smiled at him. Ops, I forgot to say the magical words. He realized. Miss Hooch looked at him like there was something she wanted to ask but was hesitant to do so, but her attention went quickly somewhere else when Neville Longbottom started to scream. Help! Neville was holding onto his broom while this one ascended into the sky. Mr. Longbottom, what are you doing? Get down this instant! I still haven't explained how to control the brooms in the air, ... Professor Hooch shouted at him. Excuse me, Professor, but I don't think Neville is doing it on purpose. Hermione looked at Neville with worried eyes. The Gryffindor students looked at him with uneasiness while many of the Slytherin, and especially Draco, seemed to be having a great time, laughing and pointing at Neville. Harry knew that he had to do something, so he carefully pulled his wand out and covered it with his sleeves. The last time this happened, Neville got away with a fractured wrist, but there was no guarantee that it would be exactly the same this time around. What if Neville falls a bit differently and ends up breaking his neck? He could not take that risk. Neville's broom kept going higher and higher and people getting more worried now. Then, all of a sudden, his broom started to shake and collided with the walls of the castle, making him lose his grip and precipitate straight down. Oh no! Professor Hooch struggled to get her wand out of her tunic while the students gasped and yelled in horror as Neville fell. Harry took the chance to cast a bouncing charm on the area below the falling boy. Many of the students covered their eyes or looked away when Neville was about to hit the ground, not wanting to be a witness to a macabre spectacle. The ones still looking became shocked when they saw the ground deform like it was made of gelatin when Neville landed on it. Unfortunately for him, after the second bounce, he landed outside the charmed area. Ouch! Neville cried in pain. Miss Hooch was the first one to reach his side. Let me see, Mr. Longbottom. She examined him up and down. It doesn't look like you have anything broken, but let's take you to Madame Pomfrey for a checkup. You had a nasty fall. Her eyes went up, to the place he had fallen from. It was close to one of the roofs, where the gargoyles were located, at least 20 meters high. A very nasty fall. She repeated. As she helped the boy walk, Miss Hooch turned to look at the rest of the class. While I'm taking Miss Longbottom to the infirmary, I want no one touching the brooms, is that understood? Yes, Miss Hooch. The students answered. Did you see that? Who cast that spell? Wasn't it the teacher? I didn't see her do any magic, she was struggling to get her wand out when he was falling. The students started to talk among themselves. What a bloody idiot, he can't do anything right, ... Draco commented before he and his friends started to laugh. Is not funny. He could have died. Shouted Hermione at Malfoy. Yeah, shut up, Malfoy. That's right, ... added Ron and Seamus. Harry ignored their banter and went to the place where Neville's broom had fallen. It was still in one piece, much to his surprise. Let's see. He picked it up and examined it. It was the same model as the one given to him, a clear sweeper 260. But this one was in even worse shape. Harry took a closer look at the runes of the broom. He was by no means an expert in flying brooms, but he had advanced knowledge of runes at least. He was quickly able to tell that this broom had no chance of flying correctly, as many of the runes that form part of the control section were damaged. The reaction of the broom and his fall were a lot more violent than the one I remember. Could someone have tampered with the flying broom, or maybe he just had worse luck? The possibility seemed ridiculous at first, but this was the boy who lived we were talking about. Was someone trying to kill him perhaps? Chapter 28, A Proposal. During the next week, many rumors started to circulate about what happened to Neville. Students wondered who cast the magic that saved his life. The professor was quick to admit that it wasn't her and that she should have been more prepared for that kind of scenario. From the students, no one had come forward to claim the glory of saving Neville Longbottom's life. Then someone came out with a different theory. What if Neville himself was the one who cast the spell, but he did it unconsciously? Students have been very open about their disappointment with Neville Longbottom and his magical prowess, or his lack of it. But this rumor gave birth to a new possibility. What if Neville really held some incredible power inside him but he was unable to control said power? That would explain how he defeated Voldemort when he was a mere babe. He did it unconsciously. During a moment of life and death, he invoked this mystical power and defeated the Dark Lord, and now he did it again in order to save his life. As the days passed, this rumor became more solid and people added more details, like maybe Neville had inherited his magic from Merlin himself, but as a child, he is unable to control said magic, so it will only come to be during extreme situations. The students started to look at Neville with more respect, and even Malfoy stopped mocking him at all times by suggesting he was a squib who only got the Hogwarts letter because the owl got confused. One more week passed after that and things finally started to calm down. Harry's last class of Friday had been potions, with the Slytherings. A very tiresome way to end the week. Snape had relaxed a bit with him and did not bombard him with questions, too much, but he was still quite antagonistic and would not pass any small mistake that Harry made. As he was almost done packing his stuff, a small piece of paper landed next to his hand. He carefully picked it up, looked at what was written on the paper, and left the classroom without showing any external changes in his expression. That night, after finishing his daily training routine, instead of going back to the dorms, he took a different route. One that was taking him past the trophy room and around the corner, to the room he used to hide from the janitor on his first week. Daphne Greengrass was waiting for him in front of the door. "Shall we?" She pointed at the door. He placed his hand on the handle and the door unlocked. The both of them entered and he closed the door again. The candles inside the room lit by themselves, creating a comfortable atmosphere. "Why did you ask me to come here?" he asked. The note he received that afternoon told him about some important matter she had to discuss with him. "This is a very safe room. I did some research after the day we hid here. Those old rooms are always locked, no matter the day or hours, since no one uses them. Only a teacher or the headmaster has the authority to unlock the door and enter." She left hanging the obvious fact that Harry had unlocked the door, twice already, despite being neither a teacher nor the headmaster, but she did not question him how he accomplished that. Daphne walked around for a bit before choosing a comfortable leather couch to sit down. For an abandoned room, it is spotted clean. Harry sat down in front of her. "The elves clean every room in the castle, even the ones that no one uses. We have less than an hour before curfew and I rather not get detention. Can we get to the point?" "Yes, I'm sorry. I have been meaning to talk to you earlier, but you are really hard to find once the classes are over. I am usually busy." That was all the explanation he was going to offer her for now. She nodded and did not press further on that. "I will get to the point then. I want to propose an alliance between House Potter and House Greengrass." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Did you seriously call me here at this hour to talk about politics?" He found the situation ridiculous. The girl was just 11, what could she possibly know about family alliances or their political positions? If Daphne was angry or disappointed, she did not show it on her face. Instead, she continued the talk. "What do you know about the current situation of the pureblood families in Britain?" "Situation of the pureblood families? You mean the whole war with Voldemort?" She flinched slightly at the mention of the name. "Yes, the conflict with the Dark Lord. At the beginning of it, some families declared themselves on his side, like the Malfoys or the Lestrange, while others fought directly against him like the Longbottoms or the Potters. And a third faction was formed by default, a faction composed of families who decided to stay clear of the conflict and remain neutral, like my family, the Greengrass." Harry nodded. He now understood where she was going with all of this. "During the war, the Dark faction was too busy to pressure my father into joining them, but then the Dark Lord was defeated." "But not killed," Harry added. Yes, everyone knows that he is coming back. The Dark faction has been preparing for his return, which they expect to happen in the next few years. And when he does come back, neutrality will no longer be an option. The Malfoys, Avery, and Yaxley have been pressuring my father to side with them. By pressuring him, you mean threatening him. So, what exactly that your family want? Harry decided to ask. Chapter 29, An Alliance. We need allies who are willing to stand up against the Dark Lord and those who support him. Neutrality is not an option anymore, and the Dark faction's offers for alliance will become worse as time passes and his return gets closer. Daphne explained. But their offers must already be quite bad since you are looking for alliances on the opposite side, added Harry. Daphne's expression darkened as she seemed to be remembering something. Lord Malfoy and Lord Avery made the same proposal, a position as a mistress for myself. While Lord Yaxley wanted me as his son's wife, but only if my sister joined in as the mistress. Harry was surprised to hear her say those things in such a nonchalant way. He never learned much about the workings of the pureblood families. And no one among his friends or mentors could teach him either, except for Neville, but the boy was not exactly fond of the pureblood customs and etiquette. But this girl in front of him was different. Daphne has been raised by a pureblood lord and educated to become his successor. A normal 11-year-old girl would not be talking about alliances and marriages in such a manner. We were also warned that if we waited for too long to answer, the only offer we would get would be from lower dark families like Crabble, Goyle, or Selwyn. And they may not even be for a marriage. She added. How can you be so calm while talking about becoming someone's mistress? You are bloody 11, do you even understand what that entails? Daphne looked offended at this. I am the heir of a pureblood family, of course, I would know about these things and what they entail. My parents have been preparing me to be the next lady since I was 6 years old. And I'm sure you have also been taught these things the same way. He considered for a second, but it seemed unlikely that his father had done that. He had no memories of the previous owner of this body, but he seemed to hate his parents with fervor and would not have listened to any lessons from them. Maybe they have taught some of this to Lyra, but I doubt they will arrange any marriage for her. Our mother would never allow it anyway. He just knew a few things about pure blood etiquette and costumes. It was no more than a side effect of spending so many years chasing down Death Eaters. I know some things, but I don't think my family will arrange marriage contracts for me or my sisters. Daphne looked genuinely surprised for the first time since they entered the room. How else can you create a proper alliance? One that is strong enough to be trustworthy without a bond of blood. Harry then realized something. Wait, then, when you first mentioned making an alliance between our families, you were talking about writing a marriage contract for us. Daphne nodded. When I came to Hogwarts, the idea was to approach Longbottom and start negotiations. After all, they are a very ancient pureblood family and Neville Longbottom is the, you know. And why didn't you? He could already imagine why though. Well, the Longbottom heir is, not what I was expecting. Then I meet you. You are a lot more, capable. And the Potters are one of the most influential families of the light side at the moment. This girl only sees marriage as a tool to improve her family's situation, tossing away any emotional part. Harry thought. So you would marry me or Neville because it would be good for your family as a whole, is that it? He was getting annoyed with this conversation. Daphne looked to be fighting hard the need to roll her eyes at his stupid question. Well, obviously. Consult your father about the offer and try to give me an answer during the next week if possible. Our father could also arrange a meeting to finish the details. She was talking about it like it was a business transaction and it was making Harry very uncomfortable. And you would be okay with that? You would marry a guy that you know nothing about because it could be beneficial for your family. That is how pureblood families work. It has always been like that, is the tradition. And my father cares for me and my sister, he would never agree to marry me off to someone who would treat us badly, that is one of the reasons he never accepted any contracts so far. Harry sighed. The standards and priorities for old pureblood families were something he could never agree with, but he knew it was going to be pointless to argue with her about it. She had been learning these things since she was 6 years old. For her, this was just how the world worked and there was nothing wrong with it. However, completely rejecting the offer for an alliance would be unwise. At this moment, the one thing he was lacking the most was information about what Voldemort and the Dark families were doing. Maybe the Green Grass could use their unique position as a neutral family to collect some. The problem was that he could not make an alliance like this by himself. He was not the lord of his house, not even close. Lord Greengrass will not even consider signing a magical contract with a child, he will want to speak with his father. Well, there may be another issue, but I will have to deal with that later. He looked at Daphne, who had been observing him carefully. Why don't we arrange a meeting between our families for the Christmas break? We can discuss things further then. There is not much I can do when it comes to making decisions about alliances and that kind of stuff without my father present, I believe. Daphne seemed satisfied with his answer as a small smile appeared on her face. Of course, and is the same for me. I will send a letter to my father tomorrow, informing him of what we talked about, and then we can talk further about arranging a meeting. Agreed. Harry nodded. It seemed like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders now, and Harry noticed how Daphne had loosened up a bit now. Okay, so, do you mind opening that passage from the last time? It was very handy. She sounded more cheerful. Sure. He walked to the fireplace and opened the secret entrance. You sound more natural now. Yes, that was my business persona. Now that our business has concluded, at least for now, I can relax a bit. She pulled out her wand and cast a Lumos. See you, Potter. And remember, we must not be seen talking in public. Good night, Greengrass. Chapter 30, Quidditch Time. There was 1 week left before Halloween, and Gryffindor was about to play their second game of the year after their defeat against Ravenclaw. Harry felt a bit strange sitting in the audience box, but there was nothing he could do about it. Looking around the stadium, he was hit by a wave of nostalgia, remembering the many years that he played on that field, chasing the snitch for Gryffindor. I hope they do better this time. Of course, they will. I heard that they got a new Seek this time. Harry overheard the conversation that Ron and Seamus were having on the seats right in front of him. A new Seeker? What a coincidence. Or maybe it was something else. His eyes moved towards the teacher's box, where the headmaster was smiling like usual while Deputy Headmistress McGonagall looked around the field with worried eyes. Say, Hermione. He called to the girl sitting to his right. She lifted her face from the book she was reading, an old tome called Quidditch Ruling 1890. Yes. Where is Neville? I know he is not very interested in Quidditch, but he is usually with those two. He said while pointing forward at Ron and Seamus. Now that you mention it, is strange. She looked around the box but could not spot, and it was very unusual to not see that trio together. They had been inseparable since the year started. Seamus, Ron, do you know where Neville is? She decided to ask. He left the dorm very early this morning and I haven't seen him since. I have no clue where he could have gone. Seamus looked genuinely confused. I don't know anything. Ron answered abruptly and turned around to not look at them. He is a terrible liar, Hermione whispered into Harry's ear. He had to agree, that even as an adult, Ron had always been bad at lying. He definitely knew where Neville was. Harry already had a hunch of what was going on, and he would only need to wait a bit longer to confirm it. Welcome to the fourth game of the Hogwarts 1991 League. The cheerful voice of the commentator could be heard resounding all over the stadium thanks to the masterful work of magical runes on the place. I am Lee Jordan and I will be your commentator. The students started to clap and cheer. This will be Gryffindor's second game after their defeat against Ravenclaw. But they have come back with a secret weapon, a mysterious new Seeker, whose name they have refused to reveal. Jordan gave McGonagall a side glance. Their opponents this time is the Slytherin team, the champions from last year, and a few years before that one, but who is counting? Jordan. McGonagall gave him a warning glare. Right, let's get started then. First to jump into the field will be Slytherin. The green-robed team came flying into the stadium. Their own selection of the spectator boxes started to cheer while the rest remained silent. The Slytherin team was, by far, the least liked one of the four. Mostly due to their rough play and borderline illegal tactics. And now, the team we are all hoping will take the win today. Jordan. This time, a stronger warning came from the lips of the deputy headmistress. But not me, I am completely impartial, go Gryffindor! Shouted Jordan. The players made their entrance one by one. There they are, first is no other than the captain himself, Oliver Wood, who plays as the keeper. Next, we have the two beaters, the Weasley twins, George and Fred, and following them are our lovely trio of chasers, Angelina Johnson, Katie Bell and Alicia Spinnet. Jordan moved forward in his seat to get a better look now. And finally, flying, a bit too far behind from the others is the new Seeker, who is no other than Neville Longbottom. The stadium got very loud as everyone started talking loudly at the same time. What? Hermione shouted and almost dropped her book. Yeah, go Neville! Ron fisted the air. You knew about this? Seamus stared at Neville in shock. I caught him doing practice the other day. Sorry, I didn't tell you, they made me promise to keep the secret. Explained Ron. How did he join the team? First years are not even allowed to have a broom. Asked Seamus. Ron shrugged. He told me that Professor McGonagall had asked him to join the team. What were they thinking? After what happened to him during fling practice, he must be so scared right now. Look, his broom is shaking a lot. Hermione pointed up. Harry stared at the broom that Neville was riding. It was a very familiar one. He is using a Nimbus 2000. Really, that's the fastest broom in the market. Ron turned around to look at Harry. You can see it from here. Seamus questioned. Well, that was quite the surprise. The commentator spoke again. Gryffindor has no other but the boy who lived, the hero of magical Britain as their seeker. The Gryffindor box erupted into cheers. Now, players. Get to your positions. Jordan instructed. Professor Hooch walked to the center of the field and pulled her wand out. Neville, come over here. Called Oliver from his place next to metal rings. Stay flying high until you see the snitch. Remember the training. I know. Neville flew slowly upwards, gripping the broom with all his force. Say, Ron. Neville got better at flying since that day, right? Asked Seamus with some doubts after seeing his display. I haven't really seen him fly yet, but I'm sure he has. Besides, he has a brand new, top-of-the-line flying broom. Even my little sister could catch the snitch with that broom. Ron exclaimed loudly. Your sister is a much better flyer than you. Harry thought. Ready. Professor Hooch lifted her wand in the air and a ball of light shot out. Game start. Chapter 31, The Dangers of Quidditch. The players immediately got busy. Angelina, Katie, and Alicia went to intercept the quaffle while the Weasley twins protected them from Slytherin beaters. Oliver Wood watched with rapt attention, not losing sight of any detail. Both seekers were flying higher than the other player, overseeing the entire stadium. Oi, Longbottom! The Slytherin seeker approached Neville and looked at him with a nasty smirk. Neville looked forward at the other boy and started to shake a little. The Slytherin seeker was a much older boy than himself. He figured that he was at least a fifth year. What do you want? Not much, just wanted to ask if you were okay there. You were looking a bit shaky. Neville stared dubiously at the older boy. He was fairly sure that the Slytherin seeker was just trying to mock him in some way. The Slytherin boy realized this and raised his hands defensively. Hey, come on. I'm just trying to be a good sport here. I'm okay. He said hesitantly. I just don't like heights very much, not since my uncle threw me off the third floor of the house in an effort to awaken my magic. I see, then, let me give you a few tips. He rose one finger up. Number 1, test your broom before every game. Neville nodded while listening. Number 2, charming your uniform pants with a cushioning charm is a game changer. And number 3. A smirk appeared on his face. Always keep an eye on the enemy beaters. Neville, move. The desperate shout from Oliver reached Neville's ears, but he didn't understand what was happening or where he was supposed to move. It was then that Neville saw the Slytherin seeker quickly flying to one side just as a bludger flew past him and hit Neville on the chest, making him fall backward. Oh no! Harry heard Hermione as she rose from her seat. He is going to fall. Lavender was sitting on his left, covering her face. Neville managed to barely hold on and was now hanging with only his fingers touching the flying broom while this one remained floating in the air. Oh boy, Gryffindor's seeker has been hit by a bludger and is barely hanging from his broom. This does not look good. Lee Jordan did his best to keep his commentary while everyone stared at Neville. Do something, Albus! Shouted McGonagall. Dumbledore nodded before standing up with his wand already in hand. The other Gryffindor player had already abandoned their position and rushed to help their teammate, but before anyone could get close enough, Neville lost his grip and fell while giving a blood-curdling scream. The headmaster pointed his wand at Neville and started to cast a feather fall charm when he noticed a large amount of magic concentrating right beneath the boy. What is that? He looked at the events with great curiosity. A strong gust of wind came out of nowhere and slowed Neville's fall until he was almost floating in the air. The wind then got progressively weaker and disappeared completely when he was only a few feet off the grassy field. Harry watched the scene from the box and breathed in relief while storing his wand back. This is the second time that boy needs to stay away from brooms. He is safe. Hermione cried. Bloody hell, that was close! Shouted Ron. Did you see that? Is like what happened that day during flying practice. Told Lavender to her friend but loud enough for everyone in the box to hear. Are you talking about the rumors of him awakening some ancient magic? Asked Parvati, even though she was one of the main culprits for spreading that rumor. They were just doing it for fun and never considered there could be some truth to it. The game was stopped after that while they gave Neville a medical checkup. 30 minutes passed after that and the students were starting to get anxious. What is taking so long? Could Neville be seriously hurt? Asked Hermione. I'm sure he is fine, he barely fell 2 feet after the wind stopped. But I would be seriously surprised if Neville is still willing to ride a flying broom anytime soon after this. Answered Harry. In the end, he was right. Professor Hooch came back into the stadium 10 minutes later to announce the end of the match. Gryffindor Seeker had refused to play again after the incident and the team had not prepared a replacement for him. So with the lack of one player, they were forced to forfeit the game, giving Slytherin the win. The next day, Headmaster's office. Albus Dumbledore was sitting on his chair and looking very uncomfortable towards his visitor. Augusta Longbottom looked like she was ready to jump over the table and smash the old wizard's head with one of the many objects decorating his desk. 1 month, Albus. He's only been here 1 month and is already injured. Augusta spat with rage. Augusta, you know that magical schools have some risks. Don't give me that, don't think for a moment that I don't know about the previous incident that occurred in his first week. The old witch could not have her eyes narrowed any further. It was just an accident, Augusta. Quidditch can be a bit dangerous sometimes. Minerva, who was the third and last occupant of the office at the moment, decided to help the headmaster a little bit. Oh, I'm not blaming that other boy for his trickery, Minerva. I'm blaming whoever thought that putting my grandson on that broom and having him play a Quidditch match was a good idea. Her eyes moved from Minerva to Dumbledore. Which one of you made that decision? I made the suggestion. Spoke the headmaster. I thought it would help young Neville with his confidence issues. After he almost broke his neck on his first flying class, you thought that would give him more confidence? And since when is that your job? I am her grandmother. You are supposed to educate him, nothing more. Augusta shouted. I can assure you that we just want the best for your grandson. Minerva tried to placate the angry woman. He has already left the team, he won't be playing again. Of course, he won't. I would not have allowed such a thing to happen again. The old witch looked at Dumbledore. I hope this is the last time I have to visit my grandson in the infirmary, Albus. I have you know that there are other options for education besides Hogwarts. The headmaster's expression changed a bit at this. That won't be necessary. There is no other place where he is safer than in Hogwarts, trust me. Humph, trust you, after what happened to, never mind. Augusta seemed like she wanted to say something more but kept it to herself. Chapter 32, Halloween. October 31st, Halloween night. The Great Hall was filled with people celebrating the feast. All eating, drinking, and laughing, for this was a joyous night, for most. Harry was slowly picking at his food with conflicted feelings. He has always hated Halloween, it was the night his parents had been murdered and if that was not reason enough, something bad tended to happen always on this night, as if a curse had been placed over this particular festivity. But now, things were different. Both his parents were alive and he even had 2 younger sisters. He did not feel sad or lonely and that made him feel guilty. Was he being disrespectful to his original parents, the ones who gave up their lives for him if he enjoyed his time with his new family? They were the same persons, or at least, different versions of the same persons after all. He was not sure and could only hope that time will help in that matter. But now he had another concern. His eyes moved to the right and focused on the entrance doors of the great halls. They had been shut tight before the feast started, but Harry noticed that there was one person missing. He now looked at the teacher's table as if to confirm it. But there were no doubts about it. The new defense professor, Keshav Nair, was missing from the party. This was a familiar situation and for a moment, Harry wondered if the professor was about to stumble into the Great Hall while yelling about trolls wandering the dungeon. No, that's a stupid thought, this is not even the same professor. He looks so sad. The voice of Hermione reached his ears. Harry did not need to ask who she was talking about, as this was the third time she made the same comment tonight. He looked at Neville. The boy was looking down and did not even touch his place, he was indeed looking sad. That was not really surprising. After the infamous game, most of the Gryffindor house had turned against him in ways that Harry was very familiar with, as it had happened to him several times. On the bright side, there were even more people now who believed that Neville had some incredible magical powers hidden inside him after the wind spell that saved his life. That may be the reason why his punishment has been limited to verbal slurs and no one has tried to raise their wand against him, lest his magic acts on its own to defend him and they find themselves plastered against one of the many walls of the castle. Even Malfoy had not dared to do much, other than some very unimaginative taunts here and there. But Harry knew that there was one thing more important on Neville's mind at the moment. Like in his own past, today was the anniversary of his parents' deaths. Is like the same story but with a different main character. Harry thought. In the end, Professor Nair never appeared, the doors were not opened by anyone calling for some emergency and the party ended with no issues. Something that Harry was not accustomed to. He even allowed himself the thought that he may experience an entire school year at Hogwarts with no serious incidents, other than Neville almost dying twice, but that could still count as a normal year. A strong wave of cold wind hit Harry in the face as he was ascending the stairs and he decided to cast a warming charm on himself. Much better, he said with relief. It was still early in the morning so he was not expecting to find anyone in the Owl Tower. There you go, I got you some bacon. Harry heard a boy speaking before he passed by the door frame. His eyes opened wide when he saw it. Neville was sitting on a wooden bench, feeding a pure white owl. Hedwig. That's a beautiful owl. Neville was startled by the sudden appearance of someone else. Like Harry, he was not expecting to find anyone else this early in the morning after last night's party. Harry. Sorry for startling you. He apologized. It's okay, I was just a bit distracted. Neville gave her another treat and the owl happily ate it. What's her name? Harry said while pointing at the owl. You can tell is female, ... Neville looked at them with a hint of admiration. I couldn't tell at all when I first bought her. But then I tried to name her Trevor and she, och. The owl had pinched his hand. She reacted like that. Trevor. Wasn't that the name of his frog or something? He seems to recall. Yes, that was the name of my frog. Neville made a sad expression. What happened to him? Neville sighed. It was last year when I had finally convinced my gran to take me to Diagon Alley to buy some plants. The truth is I just wanted to go out for a bit, you see, my family doesn't let me go out very often. They say is not safe. It really isn't safe. Harry agreed. Anyways, we were at this shop and someone recognized me for my scar. That person started to scream my name and just a few minutes later, I was surrounded by people, all talking to me at the same time while my gran was yelling at them to leave. He looked down at his hands. I had Trevor on my hands but he must have gotten nervous with all the noise because he jumped out and landed on the floor. The people at the shop did not seem to realize and they kept trying to get closer to me. I tried to tell them to be careful, that my frog was on the floor but they didn't seem to hear me and just keep asking questions. Before I could do anything, someone stepped on Trevor. I yelled at them to stop but they were all yelling and pushing at each other, and kept stepping on him. Poor Trevor, I could not save him. Wow, sorry Nevada. Harry placed a hand on his shoulder. Thanks. I wasn't allowed back on Diagon Alley after that. Not until it was time to get my wand. So, in the end. What did you call her? Harry looked at the owl. Neville smiled. I was first going to call her Petunia. Harry gasped. The flowers come in different colors but the white ones are my favorite ones. She didn't like that name either for some reason, Neville said while looking at the old. In the end, I went with Snow. Is boring, I know but she seems to like it at least. Neville petted the owl and this one gave a happy noise. Thank Merlin. Harry felt a great relief wash over him. Chapter 33, A Home. December 20th, King's Cross Station. Harry was one of the first students to leave the train and was promptly assaulted by something small that latched onto his leg. Harry. The little girl called him with joy. He looked down at the image of his little sister and could not help but smile. Harry got down on one knee and hugged her. Hello, Holly. How have you been? It was boring. She pouted. Dad is always working and Mom never takes me anywhere. Only Lyra gets to go to her friend's house, is not fair. I see. He did not expect this little girl to have so many complaints. He then saw his mother running towards them. Holly, what did I tell you about running off like that? But Mom, I haven't seen brother in so long. Holly answered. Well, talk about this later. Lily's eyes moved to Harry and her expression brightened. She quickly went to give him a warm hug. Welcome back, dear. How was your time at Hogwarts? I want to hear every detail. Oh, but you must be tired after the long trip on the train, let's get you home first. Home? Hey. He was still getting used to this new life and the sensation of actually having a home, something he never had the chance to experience for long. Okay, you two. Hold on tight to me and don't let go. Both Harry and Holly did as told and Lily lifted her wand in the air. A moment later, the trio disappeared from the busy station. When Harry opened his eyes, he found himself at the entrance of the Potter Manor. Welcome, Dot. The family house elf, Mipsy greeted them. Let me help you with that bag, Master Harry. The elf used her magic to levitate his small briefcase and carried it inside. I'm home, said Harry, mostly to himself. After taking a relaxing bath and changing clothes, the sky outside was starting to darken. He opened the door to the kitchen and found his mother inside preparing some food while Holly read a book on the kitchen table. He looked around before sitting down at the table. Lily noticed this and answered his unasked question. Your dad is at work, he should be here in an hour. And your sister is staying at one of her friends' home, she will be here tomorrow. A friend's home, is the Weasleys, Dot. He recalled that his sister was friends with Ginny, even though the Weasleys were not that close to the Potters, especially after they left the Order of the Phoenix. At least, he had never heard of them hanging out with Molly and Arthur. No, she has been staying with the green grass for a few days. The green grass. He raised an eyebrow. That right, that's why I recalled them mentioning that family name before I went to Hogwarts. Lyra must be friends with Daphne's sister. How did that happen? He decided to ask. Lily looked a bit surprised at him showing interest in his sister's friends. Well, last year, Lady Greengrass and I met at a ministry party, she had brought her 2 daughters and I brought only Lyra because you didn't want to come and Holly was too little for such an event. She got along with the youngest and they talked for hours. They have been quite close since and often send letters to each other but this is the first time she has stayed at their house. How so? With Fleur Powder, it only takes a moment to visit, Harry asked, but he had already a few ideas. Well, Astoria has some special circumstances that don't permit her to leave the house and your father was not thrilled to allow Lyra to visit the green grass house until he knew them better. Explained Lily. Because they are a neutral family. Lily looked genuinely surprised this time. Have you remembered some of the politics classes your father gave you? You never showed any interest in those. Harry shrugged. Not really interested in politics, but it doesn't hurt to know those things. After all, their family had been personally involved in the last war so there was no way for them to remain unattached from the magical Britain political scene. I'm bored, Harry, play with me. Holly complained loudly. You are bored, hey, Dot. He looked at the book she was reading, it was one of Neville's fantastical adventures, which reminded him of something. You know, I have brought with me a nice gift for my sister. Her eyes opened like plates. A gift, what is it, can I have it? He smiled. You'll have to wait until Christmas for that. No, I want it now. Holly exclaimed. Okay, maybe it was a mistake to mention that, lesson learned. Harry considered. Where did you get a gift from? Lily asked with suspicion since first-year students are not allowed to leave the grounds. You'll have to wait too. He said. A bit later, James Potter got home from work and welcomed Harry back. I heard of what happened during the Quidditch game before Halloween, what a shame, James spoke. They haven't been able to play again without a seeker and had to forfeit the next game after that. Explained Harry. I don't think they have a chance to win the Quidditch Cup at this point. James lamented. I don't know why you care so much about school Quidditch to be honest. Lily commented. But it's our house. I will always care for Gryffindor and its Quidditch team, as a former player, can't help it. James gave Harry a look. They should have chosen Harry to be the seeker. James, he is still a first year. Quidditch can be dangerous, look what happened to poor Neville. Lily pointed out. Oh well, there is always next year. Oh, Harry. James called his name. Yes. There is something we need to talk about. Come to my studio after dinner. Sure. Harry wondered what it was about. He was sure it wasn't about his grades, he had made sure to keep them above average. It must be about that. Chapter 34, Factions. James and Harry went to his studio after dinner was over, leaving behind a very curious Holly. His father took a seat on a comfortable-looking leather chair behind a large desk and indicated for Harry to sit down on the opposite side. His expression looked serious, but Harry noticed a hint of amusement hidden in there. Do you know why I called you here? James asked. There is only one reason that I can think of. Oh, you do? And do to tell me, what is this reason? A sneaky smile appeared on his father's face. You must have received a letter from Lord Greengrass about a potential alliance between our families, answered Harry. James grinned. Yes, he told me that you and his eldest daughter talked about this matter in Hogwarts. You don't waste time, do you, son? Harry raised an eyebrow, not liking what his father was implying. I merely suggested for Lord Greengrass to contact you for a meeting if they wanted to discuss something like a formal alliance. After all, neither Daphne nor I have that kind of authority. Was it the wrong thing to do? No, it wasn't necessarily wrong. But I think that you should understand a bit more about the political factions of magical Britain. For the last centuries, there has been a strong division among the pureblood families. James said. Even before Grindelwald. He never had the chance to learn much about the political environment of the country before everything went awry, so there were many things he didn't know. Yes, Dark Lords like Grindelwald or Voldemort just took advantage of a problem that already existed and used it for their own purposes. The two current factions are most commonly known as the Progressives, led by Albus Dumbledore, and the Traditionalists, led by Lucius Malfoy, at least officially. Harry took note of that last part. The second faction was definitely led by Voldemort, but since he is still considered a criminal, Lucius is the official face of the group. These two factions have been bickering with each other about many different topics they disagree on, but the most common thing is laws that affect Muggles and Muggleborns. One side wants to make our world more accessible while the other one wants to keep anyone who is not a pureblood wizard or witch out of our culture. But there are some families who prefer not to choose a side and remain neutral. Harry added. James nodded in approval. Very well, yes. Families like the Greengrass among others. They decided to avoid permanently joining any sides so they could pick and choose whatever was more convenient to them or what policy benefited them the most. As you can imagine, this kind of attitude did not make them very popular by either side. But if the family is powerful and influential enough, they can get away with it. Daphne told me her family is now suffering a lot of pressure from the more traditional families, said Harry. Yes, and it seems like Lord Greengrass has made his choice on who he wants to ally with, admitted James. This must be the reason he finally let Lyra go to their house. He must have gotten some reassurance from Lord Greengrass. Harry considered. So, do you know what is going to suggest in order to secure this alliance? His father asked. Harry nodded. Daphne had made it very clear. And what do you think about that? James asked. I don't think Mom would be pleased if I got married before finishing my first year of school. Harry delivered with a deadpan expression. James started to laugh. I bet she would not be amused at all, no. But this would only be an engagement, no one gets married this early in life. You can think of it as a long-term promise. The marriage itself would only take place after you are both adults. She told me that these types of deals are common among pureblood families, said Harry. Among some of them, the Potters have not done something like a forced marriage contract since the times of my grandfather. My parents married because they fell in love during their Hogwarts years, and I did the same with your mother. So even if Lord Greengrass suggests something like this, I would never agree to it, and neither will your mother. Lord Greengrass would not be pleased. He may refuse an alliance with us and go join with another family. Harry considered. There are other ways to secure an alliance, and I am sure the Lord is aware of that. Of course, a marriage gives the strongest bond between two families. I already have an idea of what to suggest to him, so don't worry. If you like this girl, you can court her in a few years. James gave Harry a playful wink. Harry made a surprised expression like her, is that what he thought was going on? Leaving aside the fact that she was just a child. Harry didn't have a chance yet to consider matters like love. He has only been in love one time during his previous life. After he lost his wife, Ginny, he never had time for things like that again. Always fighting, always trying to find ways to kill his enemies in more efficient ways or trying to just survive one more day. He hasn't even taken the time to think about the moral dilemma that would be to date anyone in this alternate reality. Even if he ignores the age difference when it comes to mental maturity, this entire world still feels somewhat surreal to him, and being together with someone here would feel like he is replacing someone he knew for a copy of that person. The mental image of an adult Ginny appeared at the front of his mind and Harry shook the thought away. It is easier to form genuine connections with people he never knew in his past, like his parents or sisters, since everything is new to him. But for those like Hermione, Ron, or Ginny, it will take more time until they stop feeling like copies of people he once knew. James was looking at his son who seemed to be in deep introspection and he concluded that his son was nervous about the green grass girl. "Son, don't you worry." He gave Harry a thumbs up. "Potters always get the girl they want in the end." Harry tilted his head to the side in confusion. Hey! Chapter 35, The Contract. On the next day, Lyra came back home accompanied by Lord Greengrass and Daphne. After exchanging the formal pleasantries expected from the situation and nothing more than that, the parents moved the conversation to the privacy of James' studio where he had been talking with Harry the day before. The room was big enough to comfortably fit 10 people, so it was not a problem for the current meeting. Lord Greengrass and his daughter sat on one of the couches while the Potters sat on another one that was placed on the opposite side. Lord Greengrass pulled a piece of parchment from inside his robe and placed it on the short table that was between the two families. He then proceeded to take out a small box that, when opened, revealed a very expensive-looking quill. Harry knew there was something special about that parchment since it had a great number of runes he recognized, but he could only guess the function of the complete array as that would require a closer and more lengthy examination. For the quill, however, he did not even need a second to identify it. He became very familiar with that particular type of quill during his 5th year at Hogwarts. And judging from his mother's expression, she also knew what it was. "A blood quill? What did you bring that for?" Lily raised her voice more than she had intended, making Lord Greengrass's expression change momentarily to a light frown. "Calm down, Lily. Blood quills are commonly used to sign important magical contracts." James tried to explain to his wife. Indeed, as Lord Potter said, blood quills are a necessity for this type of contract. Blood is the most efficient way to ensure a deal as that is the source of our magic. Lord Greengrass spoke with a grave voice. Lily observed the parchment with interest. "What kind of contract is this? I never seen protections like these ones in a contract, and some of the runes are of globling origin." "That's because this contract was made by Gringotts goblins. Once the contents are written and signed with blood, the contract becomes unbreakable and is also enforced by the Goblin nation. Is the most secure type of document that money can buy," explained Lord Greengrass. Daphne listened to her father talk with a prideful expression. "Impressive, now all that is left is to discuss the contents of such a contract. Why don't we start with, what do you expect to get, Lord Greengrass?" James looked at the other lord. Lord Greengrass moved his long blonde hair out of his face and observed James for a moment before speaking. "What I want is very simple, protection for my family, you know from who. Once he realizes our refusal to join his side, he and his followers will show us no mercy. You don't need a contract for that." "Of course, we will help your family," exclaimed Lily. Lord Greengrass gave her a stern look. "And I am meant to trust the future of my family and house on your word, Lady Potter? No offense, but old magical families like ours do things differently," Father Daphne warned. "I hope you are not suggesting that my wife is not to be trusted because she is a Muggle-born." James had a hard expression on his face as he said those words. Lord Greengrass did not seem to mind. "Do not twist my words, Lord Potter. I don't share those silly beliefs that some of my fellow lords and ladies like to speak so much about." He looked at Lily. "Lady Potter, when it comes to the safety of my family, words are not enough. Not from you, your husband, or anyone else, regardless of their blood status or political position." Lily made an expression of disapproval. "While I can agree with some of that, being distrustful of everyone is not a healthy attitude. It has maintained our legacy for many centuries while other old families have disappeared over time," rebuked Lord Greengrass. "Now, let's get back to the matter in question. To cement this alliance between our families, I propose making a marriage contract between our heirs. Yes, I thought you were going to propose that. James looked at his wife with a troubled face. Is there a problem, Lord Potter? Lord Greengrass frowned. Let me make it very clear that we are not looking down on your proposal. Uniting our two families with a marriage would certainly be a welcome thing, said James. However, asked Lord Greengrass. However, our children are still too young for such compromises, said Lily. Of course they are, clamored Lord Greengrass. That's why we, the adults, must make those decisions for them. James saw that his wife looked ready to explode into a rant about how outdated that custom was, so he decided to speak first while firmly holding her hand as a sign of "let me do the talking." Yes, that has been a tradition between pure-blood families since before Hogwarts was funded, I am aware of that. But the Potters had stopped doing contracted marriages since the times of my father. Your father married the sister of the former Lord Black, a very prestigious family. Back then at least. Lord Greengrass pointed out. He did. But only because they both fell in love with each other. In fact, the Blacks were not happy with marriage at all. According to what my mother told me, they almost banished her from the family for it. Explained James. I see, I did not know that. But where are you getting with this? Asked the Lord. What I'm trying to say is that I want my children to have a choice, like my father did and like I did. James looked at his wife with a warm smile. I want them to be happy and marry someone they truly want to spend the rest of their lives with. I will not take that choice from them. Choosing who to marry without taking into account what benefits it could bring to your family. Daphne looked at the Potters with a complicated expression. That seems very selfish to me. So, I am to understand that a marriage contract is out of the table then? What do you propose then, Lord Potter? Lord Greengrass looked at James. James returned the look. I wouldn't say is out of the table yet. But, I discussed this with my wife and we have an idea that could work for everyone. Chapter 36, Presents. December 24th. The Potters were sitting at the table and enjoying their Christmas dinner while chatting. Harry looked over at his new family and smiled. This was a scene he had dreamed about many times during his lonely childhood years. Just having a family and spending time with them, he had wanted that for so long, and now that he has it, he was willing to do anything to protect it. Lily looked at her son with her bright green eyes. Harry, dear. Is everything okay? You have been very quiet. He nodded at his mother. Everything is great, Mom. I was just thinking about some stuff. Were you perhaps thinking about how many classes are you going to fail in your first year? Said Lyra with a mischievous smile. Lyra, don't say those things. Harry is not going to fail any classes. You are studying properly, right son? Asked James. Of course, Dad. I'm doing fine at school. He made sure to not stand up too much during his classes, but he wasn't going to fail either. All of his grades were at least decent, even in potions, much to the professor's displeasure. What about potions? It was like his father had just read his mind. Snivellus is not giving you trouble, I hope. Or else, I will have tea. James, you have to stop calling him that, even more so in front of the children. That being said, Lily's eyes turned to look at Harry. Is he giving you a hard time? You can tell me if he does. He is a tough teacher, but I don't think he is harsher with me than with the rest of the students. Harry decided to lie a bit. He didn't want his parents to go complain to Snape, that would just make things worse. He already knew the man quite well. Lily looked slightly upset. He shouldn't be tough with his students at all, and especially with the first years. The process of potion making is very delicate and being able to keep calm is extremely important for good results. Severus was always strict with himself when we were students. He was the type of person who would not tolerate even a small mistake. If he is putting his students to the same standard. Or, maybe he is just a twat. Added James. James, language, ... Lily spoke with rising fury. Was this professor a friend of yours, Mom? Asked Lyra, who had been wanting to get into the conversation for a while. Lily calmed herself down and addressed her daughter. He was. We grew up in the same neighborhood and attended Hogwarts together. But we were sorted into different houses and talked less and less over the years. Eventually, we had a big disagreement, and we haven't really talked after our graduation. Can we talk about something happier than that gloomy man? I mean, is almost Christmas already. James pointed at the clock hanging from the wall. The needles were only 10 minutes away from midnight. We have presents to open. The mere mention of the word presents seemed to have awakened Holly from her slumbering state. Presents, yes. She started to yell. The family moved to the main living room of the house where the presents had been stored under a big tree. The room had been decorated by Lily and Mipsy, and it even had fake magical snow falling from a cloud that was moving around the place. Holly did not care much about all of this and just sprinted towards the tree. Presents. Holly, wait. Don't open them yet. Lily ran after her daughter. Lyra pretended to be more composed, but she walked relatively fast towards the tree and started to look for the boxes with her name on them. Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to his father. Go on, son. I think there are a few with your name. James gave Harry a wink and tapped him on the back. He felt a bit awkward by celebrating the holidays in such a manner. It reminded him of the ones he spent with the Weasleys. But he never grew accustomed to them, always feeling like a bit of an outcast in them. This was supposed to be his real family, but he could not help but still feel like that. Pushing the negative thought aside, Harry found 2 boxes with his name written on it. His 2 sisters were already busy opening their presents, so he decided to do the same. Inside the small box were 2 books. One looked new while the other one was a fairly worn-out notebook. This is... Oh, that's mine, said his mother as she moved to his side. The cover of the new book said 100 Tips and Tricks for Young Potioners. That book contains a lot of incredible useful information to make your potion class much easier. I always lamented that I only found out about that one when I was in my 4th year, so I told myself that I would get one for my children when they were old enough. She pointed at the other one. I figured that Severus could give you a hard time. That notebook is from my own first 3 years. It has a lot of useful guidance on how to perform the potions from Howards curriculum. It was written by both me and Severus. But don't let him see it, he may get mad. Harry opened the notebook. It was filled with notes handwritten by his mother. I would have given anything to have a memento like this in the past. Lily gave him an apologetic smile. I know that books are not a great present for children. So I put a lot of candy at the bottom of the box. No. This is great, thank you, Mom. Harry smiled softly, doing his best to contain his emotions. Open mine now, come on. James approached them. You are going to love it. Harry nodded and opened the box. There was some sort of clothes inside. No. These are not clothes, this is, James, is that what I think it is? Questioned Lily. Hee, this is my good old cloak of invisibility. James proclaimed proudly. Chapter 37, Back to Class. January 8th. Harry was somewhat glad to be back at the castle. It wasn't that he didn't enjoy spending time with his family. But he felt more restricted at this house. Here in Hogwarts, he had access to several hidden places like the Room of Requirements, where he didn't have to worry about being seen by the students or teachers. But at home, it was a different story. The house was quite big, but it didn't have any places where he could do magic without taking the risk of being found out by his family or their house elf. He hated the fact that he could not be himself in front of his own family. But revealing the truth was not an option he could take right now. Even if he could somehow convince them he was telling the truth, he would be placing a heavy burden on them. But more than that, it scared him. He has no idea how would they react after learning that their real son is actually dead and instead they have been living with some alternate version copy of him. Harry. The voice of Hermione shook him from his negative thoughts. He lifted his head to look at her. Finally. She huffed with annoyance. You know, sometimes you seem to get very lost in your own world. What were you thinking so hard about? Yes, I'm afraid that is a quirk shared among geniuses. He joked. Hermione rolled her eyes. Sure, so, wanna go to the library? The library already? We just got back and we don't have any pending homework and there will be no tests for at least 2 more weeks. Harry looked around the common room. Classes were over for the day, but the students still had several hours before dinner, so most of them would be hanging around in different parts of the castle, leaving the common room almost empty at this time of the day. Other than him and Hermione, the only occupants at the moment were Lavender and Parvati, who seemed to be having an intense conversation on a couch close to the fireplace. Hermione made a troubled expression. I know, but there isn't much to do now. Ah, I see. He now realized the problem. She was bored. For him, being alone was not much of an issue. Despite having many companions and comrades during the war, he would often travel alone for long periods of time. And now, leaving aside the fact that he did not enjoy interacting with children that much, he had much to do, making it impossible for him to get bored. But for Hermione was different. Her personality made it difficult to make friends of her age. The only one who gave her any attention was Harry, but he wasn't great for company as he spent most of his free time training at the Room of Requirements. What she needs right now more than books, are some friends. But she doesn't get along with either Ron or Dean, making it very difficult for her to interact with Neville. Harry looked back at the two girls on the couch. I guess it wouldn't hurt to try. You are roommates with those two, right? He asked. Hermione turned around to observe the girls for a moment before nodding. Why? She asked. Do you talk with them often? Well, we sleep in the same bedroom but don't talk much. On the first day I tried to tell them all I had learned about the castle in Hogwarts, a history, but they didn't seem very interested. They also don't seem very interested in any of our classes, so I gave up on interacting with them. Harry wanted to smack her forehead. Most first years aren't that invested in academics or the history of an old castle, even a magical one. Did you ask them about their own interests? Hermione tilted her head in confusion. No, why would I do that? Because that's how you make friends. You get to know the other person and try to find something in common that you both enjoy. I don't think we have anything in common, and they don't seem very interesting. All they talk about is makeup and boys. She huffed. I'm sure they know something that can interest you, like. Harry tried to remember any useful about those two. He didn't talk much to them and Lavender died during their last year of school. But there were a few things he recalled. Well, they are both from pure-blood families. And Parvati family, the Paddle is an extremely old pure-blood family from India. Imagine the long story of magic they have, and their library. Hermione's eyes illuminated a bit at hearing this. You grew up in the Muggle world. I'm sure there are many things you could learn from them about being a witch that you cannot learn from books. Explained Harry. Don't look down on books. Hermione rebuked. But, you may be right. Maybe learning more about witches from magical families would not be bad. But, how do I approach them? Maybe there is a book about this in the library, I'll check tomorrow. There is no need for that, come. He held her by the hand and brought her alone as he approached the two girls. Hello, Paddle, Brown. Have you two heard the rumor about Professor Snape? He asked. Rumor? What rumor? The two of them perked up and looked at him. If it is the one about him being able to turn into a bat, I already heard it and I don't think is true. Added Lavender. No, this is something else. I heard that Snape uses a charm that he personally created to make his robes flow in that weird way. Harry was about 80% sure this was a true fact. Really? A charm? That would make sense, there is no way a normal robe should move like that, I always thought it was strange. The two of them commented. Do you two mind if we sit here? Is a bit cold in that corner. Said Harry. Sure, come sit here. Both girls made room for Harry and Hermione to sit down next to the fireplace. After that, the group talked for a long while until it was time for dinner. Harry could only hope that Hermione would take this chance to create some new friends, it was the least he could do for her. Chapter 38, Visiting Nocturne Alley. Okay, this should do it for now. Harry inspected the briefcase one last time before closing it. The magical container has been filled with all the valuables he was able to find during his 2-month search. He knew he had only scratched the surface of what was stored inside the Room of Requirements, but that was fine by him. It's not like he was planning on becoming rich by selling antiques. He only intended to get enough money to buy the materials he required at the moment. He was not a greedy person by any means. Harry left the briefcase and looked at his mechanical wristwatch. 8 o'clock, perfect. The shops at the alley must be opening right now. And since today is Saturday, I can spend most of the day away without raising suspicions. He then walked to an old full-size mirror that was left in a corner of the Room of Requirements. With a wave of his wand, the mirror became sparkling clean. Harry looked at his reflection with care. He had to make sure there were no glaring errors in his disguise. He tried to make the minimum amount of changes, since the more you change yourself, the easier becomes for others to discern that something was wrong. His hair remained the same, his eyes had only changed color to a light brown tone. He was also wearing different glasses and some muggle clothes he had brought to the school. The biggest change was his face. He had used a mixture of charms and transfiguration to make himself look around 10 years older. Unfortunately, his height remained the same since there was no way to change his size without resorting to illusions or complex potions he did not have access to. So ended up looking like a very short young man in his early 20s. I don't think the shop owner will care that much even if he notices something. Satisfied with the changes, Harry went to pick up his briefcase and took his wand out. With a smooth flick, he disappeared from the room of requirements without a trace, and not even Dumbledore would notice his absence. With a pop noise, Harry appeared in a desolated corner of Diagon Alley. After making sure that no one was around, he pulled out his invisibility cloak and covered himself with it. He had originally planned to go to a different shop, one that was located close to the main street. But now that he had his cloak back, he could sneak into Nocturne Alley without gathering unwanted attention. As expected, Borgin and Burke's were empty at this time of the day, as the usual clients prefer to go out at night. After checking his surroundings, Harry removed himself from underneath the cloak and entered the shop. The ring of the door startled the shopkeeper from his drowsy state. "Ah, client this early in the morning? That's quite a surprise." "Oh." Mr. Burks looked at the small frame of Harry with interest as he entered. "Shouldn't you be in Hogwarts, child? Are you perhaps lost?" he said with a teasing tone. Harry's eyes moved to meet his, and Burks felt a great deal of anger and hatred in them. That was not a rare thing for his average client, but not something he expected from an individual he believed to be a child. "I graduated 5 years ago and I'm not a child," Harry said with a frown that twisted his face, enhancing his more mature features. "Or are you making fun of me for my condition?" Burke realized his mistake after seeing the face more closely. That was not the face of a child. "My apologies, good sir. I meant no insult," he hurried up to say. "It's just very early in the morning and I had a long night, please forgive this old fool." "No matter. I came here to do business." Harry walked to the counter. "Of course. How can I help you?" Burke asked with a polite smile. With some difficulty, Harry placed the briefcase on top of the counter and opened it. Burks looked over with interest. "May I?" he asked for permission, and Harry nodded. Only then did the old man start to pick up the objects inside the case and carefully place them on the counter one by one while taking long glances at each piece before putting them down. "That is quite the collection of antique objects you have here. Many old books, some of them very valuable, jewelry and some very fascinating quills. I also have this." Harry took a thin stick out of one of his jacket pockets and removed the shrinking charm he had placed on it. The stick turned into a full-size broom and was also placed on the counter. "A Nimbus 100. That's quite the find. The collectors of flying brooms go crazy for these old models," said Burks. He then gave Harry a measuring look. "I don't mean to be impolite, but I am required to ask. If I may, where did you find all of these things?" Harry was already expecting this question. "My uncle had recently passed away and left me his house as an inheritance. I found this thing while browsing around the house. It's a very old house, you see." "Oh, I understand. I'm very sorry for your loss. But when we lose something we often gain something else in exchange, don't we?" It was obvious that Burks did not believe a word that Harry said. But the man did not really care if the merchandise was stolen. "So, are you interested in buying?" asked Harry. "Of course, let me see." The old man pretended to think for a minute despite already knowing the value of most of the objects he had seen. "What about 10,000 gallons?" Harry frowned. He was no expert in books or jewels, but he knew the broom alone should be worth around that much. "This old goat is trying to scam me." Chapter 39, The Looming Threat. After 10 long minutes of back and forth, Harry managed to get a deal for 50,000 gallons. "Here." He passed Burke a small piece of paper. "This is..." The old man picked up the paper and read it. "A list of things. There are several types of items listed in the paper. A variety of precious metals and stones, a new set of runic inscription tools, dragon hide, and small arc stones." "Small arc stones, how small are we talking?" "For the warding of a property, the smallest one recommended is 4 inches. asked the old man. "Around half an inch in diameter," explained Harry. "One that small would be considered scraps, no one uses them." "What would you want something that small for?" asked Burks. "It doesn't matter what I want then for." Can you get them for me? I may know a provider, but it won't be cheap. You just said they were just scraps. Harry reminded him. The old man chuckled. Yes, but you need to know an Arkstone craftsman to acquire them. Now, let's talk about the price for this list of yours. They then discussed for almost an hour until an agreement was reached. Harry will get all the items on his list plus 10,000 galleons in exchange for the antiques. This meant that he would not have enough for the alchemic ingredients he was planning on buying later on, but there was still a lot of time to get those, so he didn't complain. Come back in 2 weeks and I will have everything ready, told Burks to Harry before he left the shop. It was almost midday when he stepped outside, but he felt more tired than after training for hours. Let's get back to Hogwarts and take a nap. There you are. Harry was on his way to the kitchens when someone called for him. Where have you been all day? I have been looking for you. Daphne told him while she kept turning her head back like she was making sure no one was behind them. I was busy with some things, and I thought we weren't supposed to interact much in public, said Harry. We are not, but there is something important. Daphne kept looking around. Fine. Harry took out his invisibility cloak, got close to Daphne, and wrapped them both underneath. What are you? Is this an invisibility cloak? Her anger at his sudden physical closeness faded quickly. Stay quiet, the cloak doesn't block sound, Harry whispered. She looked displeased but chose to comply and remained quiet all the way to the room that seemed to have become their private meeting location. Maybe we should give this room a name after all. We keep coming back here. Harry removed the cloak after the door was closed. Meeting room? That should do it, suggested Daphne. So imaginative, sure, meeting room. What was that important thing that could not wait until tomorrow? Harry sat down on one of the couches. I had a long day. Stop talking like an old man, this could not wait any longer, is too big. Daphne said with a rare show of emotion. Okay. I'm listening. Professor Nayer is an assassin, she said with no hesitation. What? But he is one of the best teachers that, hold on. Harry took a pause to think about it for a bit. When did Hogwarts have a good teacher who didn't try to kill a student by the end of the year? He looked at Daphne. Fine, he is an assassin. Anything else? You have accepted this surprisingly quickly. Daphne looked a bit taken aback. Yes, well, some things just make sense, I guess. Who is the target? Take a guess, she said with her arms crossed. It must be the Weasley twins then. They must have pranked the wrong person this time, and then. Is Longbottom? Cried Daphne. Of course he is. Harry rolled his eyes. You asked. But the Weasley twins was not a bad guess. I have heard about some of the pranks they have pulled on my housemates, and let me tell you, they are not happy. How did your father find out about this? Asked Harry. He didn't tell me all the details, just that Malfoy is not as secretive as he thinks. Anything else? Like when is the attack going to happen, where or how? Before the end of the year, that's all I know. You are going to inform your father about this, correct? Harry remained silent for a minute, considering the information he had received. No, there is no need to involve my father in this, yet. How come? Isn't he an Auror? Surely there is something he could do. Daphne could not understand his motives. As you said, he is an Auror. They need solid evidence to take action in cases like this. The only thing we have is some rumors, isn't it? Harry remained impassive. But, then, are you going to ignore it? Daphne asked with disbelief. Of course not. Give me some time to think about this. Maybe there is a way to gain some evidence, then we can call my father, offered Harry. What if he attacks before that? She asked. Unlikely, killing the boy who lived while in Hogwarts would definitely attract the attention of every Auror in England. The Ministry will not rest until an arrest has been made because the public will pressure him to do that. If Professor Nayer commits the crime now, he will be forced to leave the country immediately, revealing his involvement in the matter. It would be better to wait until the end of the year, maybe even the last day. If he does it correctly and hides the evidence, by the time the Aurors find the body all the teachers and students would have already left the school, making it incredibly difficult for the Aurors to even perform an investigation. Ah! Daphne did not know what to say to that. You really thought about this, a lot, were you planning on K? Don't be silly. Daphne. Harry interrupted her. Now let us go back to our respective rooms, I'm very tired. Tired from doing what? Is Saturday? She inquired. Harry merely gave her a cryptic smile in answer, much to the girl's frustration. Chapter 40, The Missing Boy. During the next defense class, Harry was staring at the professor while thinking about how to solve this issue. Even though he had assured Daphne that the crime would certainly not take place until the end of the year, he wasn't 100% confident about that. And he rather not gamble with Neville's life like that. Should I just kill him at the first chance I get, or maybe try to gain more information about his plans or on what the Death Eaters are doing? No, this man is just a hired wand, there is zero chance he knows something important. He held his head in frustration. I hate this kind of stuff. Let's see, what did Moody used to say, always know your enemy or something like that, maybe I can buy some information on Mr. Potter. He must have been more distracted than he thought because he failed to notice Professor Nair arriving at his side. Mr. Potter, are you perhaps feeling unwell? You seem paler than usual, asked the professor. Harry quickly brushed aside his concern, claiming a mild headache from too much reading, and the professor continued with his class. The head of the training dummy was crushed by a stone that impacted the speed of a bullet. 3 more dummies moved around the room in irregular patterns. Harry conjured some small knives before casting a banishing charm. Depulso. The blades, one of the dummies on the head and another one on the chest, missing the third target. Harry made a sound of annoyance. Foolman. A lightning bolt came out of his wand and turned the poor dummy into a burning mess. He was huffing and puffing by the end of the training, but he was feeling better. Ah, this is it. Blowing up stuff never fails to cheer me up. He exited the room of requirements at his usual time, 1 hour before dinner. This gives him enough room to take a shower and rest for a bit before leaving. Hawk snout. The fat lady nodded and the entrance to the dorms opened just in time for Harry to see Hermione, Parvati, and Lavender leaving the common room. Oh, Harry, hello. Greeted Hermione. He was glad to see her getting along with the other girls, that way he would not feel bad for letting her alone in order to do other things that he considered more important at the moment. Hello, Hermione. He looked at the other 2 girls and nodded at them. Parvati, Lavender, hello to you two too. Lavender rolled her eyes. You don't have to be so formal all the time, Harry, we are classmates for Pete's sake, dot. Lavender huffed. She is right, you know. Added Parvati. We are going for a walk through the inner garden before dinner, would you like to come with us? And I am the one being overly polite, Harry grumbled. Hermione and Lavender chuckled. He is right, you are always so posh, said Lavender. I can't help it, I was raised like that, besides, my sister Padma is much worse than me. Parvati excused herself the best she could. Well, I appreciate the offer, but I'm in dire need of a shower at the moment. Harry removed some beads of sweat that were traveling across his forehead. Have you been running or something? Asked Lavender. Something like that, Harry answered dismissively. That's not a very wizard-like behavior, Parvati commented. But, I am a very unusual wizard. Harry pointed out. Is that what you are always doing after class? You are always disappearing to go somewhere but never tell me where, you even skipped several library sessions. Hermione looked particularly miffed about that last part. Something has been bugging him since he left the dorms. A bad feeling, a uniqueness that turned his stomach and made him uncomfortable. He had always listened to his gut feelings when these warned him of some danger, but he had no idea what danger must he prepare against. Harry entered the Great Hall at a brisk pace and moved his eyes around the room, trying to gain as much information as possible. He took notice of the teacher's table, all there, including the defense professor, who was already eating in a relaxed manner. On the Slytherin table, he spotted Draco, smiling smugly while talking about something with his classmates. On the Gryffindor table, he first saw Hermione, Lavender, and Parvati. The 3 girls were starting to place food on their plates while chatting. He moved his gaze around the long table and saw the Weasley twins. And finally, sitting nearby was the not-so-golden trio, Ron, Seamus and... Where is Neville? Shit! Harry cursed. Mr. Potter, language. Professor McGonagall gave him a stern look. He apologized and moved away from the teacher's table. Harry sat next to Ron and looked at the redhead boy. Usually, Ron would be stuffing his face from his overfilled plate, so, seeing him slowly cutting a piece of chicken and barely eating any of it, was beyond weird. Something must have happened. Hey, Ron, Seamus, is Neville not coming down for dinner? He tried to ask casually. Ron stopped eating and frowned. He seemed upset at the mention of Neville. Well, we haven't seen it since our last class ended, Seamus answered and gave Ron a glance. Did you guys get into an argument or something? Asked Harry. Something like that. Seamus was carefully glancing at Ron like he was trying to avoid upsetting him by talking too much. Anyways, the professor told him to stay behind and talk about something and we left. Wait, the last class of today was defense. Harry thought with increasing worry. His gaze went back to the teacher's table. Nair was there, eating calmly. Could he have done something to Neville? It can't be, he wouldn't be here if he had done something, right? Why do you care now? You never hang out with us. Ron gave Harry an angry look. Because. While he was trying to come up with something, the house ghosts came flying into the hall. Acromantulas! Screamed Gryffindor's ghost. Acromantulas have invaded the castle. Added the Hufflepuff one. The hall went into a panic. Chapter 41, Pest Invasion. As soon as the news hit the hall, the children screamed in horror. Even the most ignorant ones knew how deadly those spiders were. The headmaster took swift control of the situation and proceeded to do the most sensible thing he could. He sent 1,000 scared children running onto the halls while the teachers searched the halls for the acromantulas. It's okay, everyone. Just follow me. The shaking voice of Percy Weasley came from the front of the group. They had separated the Gryffindor students into several groups and he was put in charge of guiding the first-year students. No matter how nervous or scared he was, Percy swore to himself to get the job done. Is this way, Percy? Shouted the fifth-year female prefect when she saw her partner make a turn into a hall with no exit. I knew that. Percy turned around and walked the other way. Yeah, he totally knew that. Of course, there is no way the prefect would panic and get lost during an emergency. The Weasley twins laughed. You two are not helping! Cried the female prefect. We weren't trying to. The twins said in unison. Why are you two even here, you are third years? Complained Percy. Mom always said that family must remain united. Said Fred. And we wanted to see you in action, added George. Percy ignored the mocking tone of his brothers. This was not the time. Do not worry, we'll be at the dorm soon enough. Well, be safe then. Looking at the terrified faces of the first year, he decided to add something else. Even if we encounter one of those beasts, I know just the spell to take them down. Percy claimed with confidence. It was something like, Aranya Exuma, or maybe Exuma Orania. I think it was something like that, yes. That doesn't sound right. The other prefect made a complicated face. Oh yes, because when it comes to performing magic, it's important to be as vague as possible with your incantation, right? Of course, that's what all the teachers say. Just shout something that sounds more or less like the spell you are trying to cast. The twins said with a mocking smile. You two, that's enough. The prefect demanded. Children, don't panic and stay close to each other. Make sure no one falls behind. She instructed. At the back of the group were Hermione, Lavender, and Parvati. I'm so scared, and those seniors at the front are not being very reassuring, said Parvati. Why couldn't Professor McGonagall come with us? Lavender said with frustration. The professors know what's best. I'm sure the headmaster had a good reason for this. Don't you agree, Harry? Harry. Hermione turned around only to find an empty dark corridor behind her. Harry. Where did he go? He was right behind me a moment ago. Hermione said with panic in her voice. Point me, Neville. Harry felt a pulsing sensation and his wand moved to point to the left. I must be getting close, is not pointing upwards anymore. Harry had separated from his group as soon as he saw the opportunity and rushed to find Neville. He was now running through a familiar hall on the 6th floor when he spotted the first acromantula. Harry pointed his wand forward, a rock the size of a basketball appeared, and with a smooth flick of his wrist, he disappeared the rock in the direction the spider was following. The young acromantula was just the size of a medium dog. It got completely destroyed by the rock that Harry threw and didn't even have time to make a noise or complain. Ah, help! He heard a voice calling for help, just a bit further down the hall. This was a corridor he was very familiar with. The trophy room was just a bit further away. Last week he came here to have a talk with Daphne, but the room was on the 4th floor back then. This corridor tended to move a lot between the 4th and 6th floors. After hearing another scream for help, Harry finally saw what was going on. Neville had gotten himself inside the cabinet that contained all the trophies. A large group of spiders were right outside, taping on the glass with their legs. Good thing that glass has been reinforced with an unbreakable enchantment, otherwise he rather not think about how close that boy had come to a nasty death. He conjured more rocks and vanished them, taking out several more spiders. The acromantulas turned to look at him and made some angry noises, but none of them attacked him, just stood there. What's is going on? Why don't they move from there? Some of the acromantulas stared at Harry while others returned to tap on the glass while the terrified Neville kept screaming. It's like they are only interested in killing him. He was no expert on animal behavior, but this was certainly strange. He was about to unleash death upon the creatures when he heard a loud noise approaching from behind. He turned his head and saw another acromantula, but this one was much bigger than the rest. This one was almost half the size of the Aragog he remembers. Its massive body was wide enough to cover most of the hallway. Harry now had around 10 acromantulas in front of him and one giant one behind. And he had to deal with them before they could slay Neville. Chapter 42, The Professors Arrive at the Scene. Chapter 42, The Professors Arrive at the Scene. The giant acromantula hissed at him while moving its frontal legs in an attempt to intimidate him. The ones behind him did the same. But they did not attack or get closer to Harry. He did not understand the reason for their unusual behavior but did not care either. He had one job to do and he was going to do it. Harry pointed his wand to the floor right beneath the giant acromantula and then followed it with a swift upward flick. The spider gave a tremendously loud shriek as it was impaled by a stone spike that rose from beneath the creature and lifted it in the air. With the biggest threat already incapacitated and dying, Harry turned around to face the rest. He threw a low-powered bombarda aimed downwards, just strong enough to blow up several stone tiles, and then followed it up with a depulso, sending all the sharp pieces of stone to the acromantulas, who had no way to dodge them. 5 more spiders went down, fire was left to go. Harry conjured a dozen knives and sent them at light speed to the creatures. The acromantulas shrieked in pain after being cut and stabbed, but none of them tried to run away. Not a single one of the creatures wanted to separate themselves from the trophy case where Neville was hiding. 4 more spiders fell victim to the knives, there was one left. Harry decided to get a bit creative with the last one. He tapped his wand against the rocky wall to his right. For a moment, nothing happened, but then, the part of the wall that was closest to the acromantula came to life. A stone hand, 3 times the size of the spider, formed from the wall itself, and with its palm completely opened, it smashed the creature in one quick motion like it was a common fly. With the deed done, the hall became silent once more and Harry contemplated what to do next. Neville had stopped his screaming and seemed to be staring at the dead acromantulas from inside the glass piece of furniture. Harry considered for a moment going to Neville and checking if he was okay, but he did not want to reveal his involvement in this matter. He was confident that Neville had not been able to discern his identity based on the construction of the cabinet he was in. Only the front part was made of glass and Harry never approached that area, instead he killed all the acromantulas from a good distance. The decision was taken away from him the moment he heard a large number of people getting closer to him. The teachers are already here, fine, I can leave the clean up to them. Harry lifted his wand and disappeared from the hallway before the adults turned the corner. This way, I heard some noises. Professor McGonagall hurried her steps. She let out a loud gasp when she saw the macabre scene. By Merlin! This is... Dumbledore's eyes scanned the hallway meticulously, pointing his wand around until it stopped on the glass cabinet. There is someone there, ... He pointed forward. Be careful, that acromantula is still alive, warned Snape as he walked from behind the headmaster. They moved as close as possible to the wall and past the twitching giant spider. McGonagall stared at the stone spike that was impaling the creature. This was done with transfiguration. The construction of the spike must have been perfect to be able to lift such a monster. Dumbledore was walking ahead of the group when he suddenly stopped. Headmaster! Snape called, wondering what took the attention of the old wizard. Dumbledore said nothing and pointed his wand at one particular spot. He moved it around and whispered some words. His eyes opened widely. This can't be. What is it, Albus? McGonagall asked this time. This area here, it has traces of... Of what? Questioned Snape. Before the headmaster had time to answer, someone started to shout. "Hey, is there someone there? Help!" McGonagall hurried up and moved to the cabinet, where she finally spotted the terrified Neville hiding inside. "Longbottom!" she exclaimed. "Unlock the doors, Mr. Longbottom!" ordered Snape. "Is it safe?" Neville looked around, expecting to see more spiders appearing. "It is quite safe, my boy. You don't have to worry about the acromantulas any longer." Dumbledore tried to sound reassuring. Neville nodded and released his iron grip on the doors, allowing it to open. "I'll take him, Madame Pomfrey," McGonagall said after making sure he did not have anything serious that required immediate action. "Yes, do that. I will visit the infirmary a bit later, we still have some work to do here," said Dumbledore. The professor took Neville away by the hand. The boy follows without complaints, looking to be in an almost state of shock. With the two of them gone, Dumbledore and Snape were left to examine the scene. There was acromantula blood splashed everywhere. It was quite a shocking view. "I'm glad Hagrid is not here to see this, he is fond of these creatures." Snape observed carefully the remains of the beasts. The conjured knives were still embedded into some of them. Then, there was the giant stone hand that crushed the last one. "You think a student could use transfiguration to this level of skill?" asked the potion professor, pointing at the hand. Dumbledore contemplated the question for a moment. "It would not be impossible for a talented 7th year to create something like that. I believe Minerva could give you a couple of names. At least that's what I would say if these were normal walls." Dumbledore tapped the wall with his wand. "There are protections weaved into them that should prevent students from affecting them with magic." "So, not the work of a student then? Is that what you think?" asked Snape. "I have one more reason to believe this wasn't done by someone so young and inexperienced. Whoever did this, he or she, escaped with apparition." Snape was filled with shock. "From inside Hogwarts? That's impossible." "Yes, well, there is always a way to make the impossible possible." Chapter 43, Useful Tools. Chapter 43, Useful Tools. The next week was not a fun one for Harry. He was first scolded by Hermione for disappearing all of then sudden and then got a week of detention with Mr. Filch. If that was not enough, Daphne has been contacting him and demanding to take some action against the professor. It took a lot of effort to convince her to wait. He had to get some solid evidence to warn the Aurors. Showing their cards too soon would only serve to put Neville in more danger. The poor boy was traumatized enough after what he went through with the acromantulas. He was taken away by his grandmother the day after and he still has not come back to school. But it wasn't all bad. At least on Friday, he had received some good news. The items he had requested from Borgin and Burke's are finally ready to be collected. He was sitting comfortably on a sofa inside the room of requirements. In front of him, sprayed over a wooden table, was a series of objects. Ingots of different metals, shiny stones, rune carving tools of high quality along with some other crafting tools, and finally, 2 wand holsters and a wand. "I spent most of my money but I think it was worth it. Especially when all of that money came from selling things he found inside this room." He started by picking up the wand. He wasn't sure of the wood, it looked like oak. His only requirement for this wand was that it had to be impossible to trace and it needed to have a phoenix feather core. It always had been his most compatible one. He felt the wand bond to himself immediately. As long as the wand had no owner, he would have no issues bonding with it. "It feels a bit weaker than my other wand, but..." He gave it a flick and conjured a blade in front of him. With a swift push, he sent it flying at a tremendous speed until it ended up stabbing one of many shelves of the room. The blade became embedded up to the hilt before disappearing. Harry nodded, looking satisfied. "This will be useful in case I have to fight using less legal spells." In his honest opinion, the Ministry was too strict with its long list of illegal magic. And if he was going to be fighting dark wizards, he was not willing to hold back. He put on one of the holsters on his left hand and stored the other one. He activated a runic cluster on the holster that would prevent it from being seen and placed his spare wand inside. It was better to keep them hidden. A wand holster was not something a student would normally carry. He would only put on the other one when going outside. "Now, let's see." He picked up one of the precious stones. It was completely clear, like a piece of glass, and had some marine on the surface. This was one of the many arc stones he bought. These stones had a single purpose. They were able to store large amounts of magic to be used at a later moment. Their primary application was to power up wards. Normally, wards will consume just a little bit of magic to operate so they can function with just the ambient magic in the air. But if the property becomes under attack, that's when the heavy defenses are activated, and the consumption of magic would increase drastically. Without one of these stones to keep powering the wards, these would collapse in a matter of seconds after the attack started, making them pointless. They had been used in every ward since the creation of the magical ministry, 5 centuries back. The one under Hogwarts was well over a millennia old and is at least 100 times larger than any other one on record, making its existence very much a mystery for Harry. But not many people knew about that one. It was a piece of knowledge that one headmaster left for the next. If more people knew, they would be going crazy to get it. Harry said. The ones on the table were much smaller than the minimum required for ward use, even for a small house, so people didn't have much use for them. They could be used to power a magical artifact on rare occasions, but Harry had another use for them. Something that wizards of this era had not come up with yet. People can get a lot more creative when their race is being massacred into extinction, I suppose. There was a lot of bitterness in his voice. He examined the little stone. It was around the size of his fingernail. But even a stone this small was able to hold more magic inside than your average adult wizard. The idea is to embed these small arc stones onto jewelry pieces that you can carry around with you. When you feel you are getting close to being magically exhausted or when you are about to unleash some grand magic, then, you activate the stone and transfer the magic to yourself, like having an extra battery. The runic work for these artifacts was also very simple. Harry had the idea after a particular exhausting battle, and then all it took was to spend a few hours with Hermione to come up with the necessary runic cluster to activate the transference. The only setback was going to be the metal alloy necessary for the jewelry. Goblin steel was the best magically conductive metal that people knew at this point in time. But Harry knew how to make one even better. He already had all the necessary ingredients, but the process took a long time. Harry glanced over the pile of ingots he acquired. To process all of that, it will take at least 3 months, but the time wasn't the only problem, but he also had to think of the location where to set up his workshop. The room of requirements is only safe for as long as he is inside. But once he leaves, anyone could stumble upon it by accident, so is not the most reliable to leave something that you don't want anyone to find for several months. I may have a better place in mind. Chapter 44, The Calm Before the Storm. Chapter 44, The Calm Before the Storm. Another month passed and we were getting close to March. Neville came back to school after 2 weeks away, and Harry could finally find out what happened that day. After his argument with Ron, he was asked to stay behind by Professor Nair. According to Neville, the professor claimed to be worried about him and his poor performance in class. He offered Neville to stay for some extra practice and the boy accepted. Late that afternoon, Neville left the classroom and was on his way to the Great Hall when he was ambushed by the spiders. Orders were called but no arrests were made. It is unclear to Harry if they suspected anyone. That is not information they would share with him, even if he was the son of one of the head Aurors. Harry had been a bit worried about Hagrid when the Ministry got involved. But apparently, his connection with the Acromantula nest inside the Dark Forest was not something many were aware of. As for Professor Nair himself, he has been very careful since the last attempt and has not made any suspicious moves. Daphne had become increasingly frustrated by his lack of action, and he had the feeling that she was close to doing something stupid. Even for an 11-year-old kid standard. What she didn't know was that Harry had several trackers on Neville and the professor. He had placed 10 trackers on the professor to be more specific. Of those 10, Nair found and disabled 9. But one was better than none. As for Neville, he didn't need to place any tracking charm. Every student of Hogwarts was being monitored since the first time they entered the castle. The secondary function of the sorting hat was to place a tracking mark on top of the student's head. Invisible to the naked eye. This mark will be able to track the position of the student inside the castle. Or even former students if they never found out about it and removed it. His father and his friends had taken advantage of this to create their Marauders map. Since Harry had full access to the wards, it was very easy for him to put together a simpler version of that map to track only Neville and Professor Nair. This way, he could always keep an eye on those two and intervene if it looked like Neville was in danger. He could then be able to catch the professor in the act. Having him arrested after that should be easy. It was a dangerous plan, for Neville that is. But he could not think of a better way to gain the evidence he needed to get the Aurors involved in this matter. Any Muggle surveillance device he could think of, would not work at Hogwarts. If the old Luna was here, she could probably come up with some runic array device to record video data into a crystal or something. When it came to ancient runes, even Hermione could not compare to the odd blonde. This would be so much easier if we're at war, Harry said while reminiscing about his past. Life was hard, yes. But things were simpler back then. If you came across a dark wizard, you killed him. If you came across a demon, you killed it. Now he had to take into account laws, human rights, politics. It would be so much easier to just go and kill the man. Then again, I'm not even sure the professor is truly a hired assassin sent to kill the boy who lived. I mean, whatever Lord Greengrass heard, must have been just rumors. Yes, the whole thing with Neville being attacked by a Cromanchulas after leaving his office is suspicious, but... He sighed. Who am I trying to convince? There is no one else who fits the bill. He knew the other professors extremely well. Nair was the only unknown factor, it had to be him. The head of a training dummy exploded. Tisk. It's always the good defense teachers. It is like the position is cursed or something. Wait, it probably is now that I think about it. Another dummy exploded. I think I have enough for today. Let's go check on that thing. He still had plenty of time before dinner, so Harry made his way to the castle foundation. He opened the painting, went downstairs, and walked for several minutes at a brisk pace until he reached the furthest corner of the room where he had set up his little workshop. Even if Dumbledore were to come down here for some cosmic causality, there was little chance of him walking up to this distant corner of there where there is absolutely nothing of interest. So this was the place where he decided to set up his station. Everything worked automatically and he only needs to check on it once a week or so. It was a very simple setup. Just a table with a cauldron and several other small tools. The cauldron was used to create the metal alloy called magicite. It was a combination of gold, silver, dragon blood, and several other alchemical ingredients. The mixture had to be melted and combined very slowly to prevent it from being separated. The cauldron was enchanted for automatic heating and stirring of the ingredients. All that was left was waiting now. It's looking good. This is going faster than I had originally predicted. It should be ready in a bit over a month. The last time he created this alloy it took him 6 months. It could be because he is using brand new high-quality tools, or maybe the conditions of this chamber made the mixture combine faster. But no matter the case, it was good news. He may be able to assemble some of his old tools before the end of this year. Chapter 45, Foul Play. Chapter 45, Foul Play. Ah, this is so annoying. Harry thought while being violently shaken. Are you listening to me? Harry. The Ice Queen of Slytherin was nowhere to be seen. Instead of, he had to deal with an obnoxious 11-year-old old Daphne Greengrass who had kept calling for him and leaving messages during classes until he finally agreed to talk with her alone. You know, if you keep calling me so much during class, people are going to start talking. Personally, I don't care much about my reputation, but that won't be good for you, right? Daphne got her hands off him and took a step back. Lately, Tracy had started to point out how distracted she had been lately, thinking about the issue with the boy who lived and the killer professor. This is important, Harry. We can't let that man kill Neville. She didn't really care that much about the Gryffindor boy, but her family had already signed a contract with the Potters. There was no going back now, their side was chosen. If the boy who lived died and Voldemort won, her family would be doomed. She had spent the last 2 months stressing herself non-stop about this, but Harry didn't seem to care at all. Always disappears to go do who knows what and then says he is too tired to talk or that he doesn't have time. She looked at his calm expression and frowned. You are not taking this seriously at all. This is not how I wanted to spend Friday night. I wonder if the elves still have chocolate pudding. Are you even listening? Daphne shouted. You know, that door is not soundproof. He decided to let her know. You are so frustrating. She shouted even louder than before. Fine, hold on. He reached inside his robes and pulled out a piece of parchment. Maybe she will shut up if I show her. What's that? She watched with attention as he unfolded the paper and placed it on the coffee table. Is blank. There was nothing written on it. You are very impatient, you know that. Harry pulled out his ebony wand and pointed at the parchment. Reveal your secrets. Whoa! Daphne exclaimed. A map of the castle appeared on the previously empty parchment. I have read about this. You protected the contents with a password, said Daphne. Yes, and as you can see, And the best you could think is reveal your secrets. That's probably the first thing people would try. She interrupted him. No one will get their hands on it. And that's not important, now, as you can see. This is a map of Hogwarts, right? She interrupted him again. Did you draw this yourself? Of course, who else is going to? Well, you are not very good at drawing then, and most of the lines are crooked. I made it in like 1 hour, now if you don't have any more critiques, take a look at the 2 names here and there. He pointed with his wand. The names Nair and Neville are written inside circles. The professor one was inside his office while the one with Neville's name was inside the Gryffindor dorms. Daphne looked at the map with great attention. Ah, it moved. Neville's circle moved from his room to the common room. I put a tracking charm on those 2. This map shows you their actual location inside the castle. If the professor tries anything, I will know thanks to this device and I will intervene or call a teacher. This is impressive, admitted Daphne. I'm glad you like it. Now as you can see, I have everything under control. There is no need for you to worry about this matter any longer, just leave it to me. Harry hoped that this would be enough to appease the girl so she stopped bothering him. Wait, you put a tracking charm on the Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts? And he didn't notice. She sounded dubious. I put 10 tracking charms actually. He removed 9 of them but was unable to find the 10th one. He explained. 10 tracking charms. But isn't there a spell to detect them? My dad said he was going to teach me next summer. He said it was important, for my own protection to learn to detect and remove such charms. Daphne said. Well, of course there are ways to detect them and once you find one, removing it is very easy. But I know a few methods to hide them well and avoid most methods of detection. Daphne looked impressed enough. How do you know so much about these charms? They are not even part of the school curriculum. Did Lord Potter teach you about them? Is not that complicated actually. He avoided the question. All that is needed is. Harry stopped talking all of a sudden as he realized something. Wait. What is it, Harry? She looked at him, wondering what could be the issue. Now that I'm thinking about it, is strange, the method I used was not a bad one but there was no guarantee to work against a wizard who was very knowledgeable in charms. He was able to find 9 of my trackers but not the last one. Why didn't that strike me as odd before? He knew why. He has been preoccupied with other matters and hasn't been giving this much thought even if he didn't want to admit it. For someone else, having an assassin waiting to strike at any time would be something nerve-wracking, but for Harry, it didn't rank very high on his priority list. However, it wasn't his life the one that was on the line so he should have been paying more attention. He looked at Daphne for a moment. It seems like he is going to have to involve the adults after all. He can't let this continue now that he suspects foul play. We may have a problem, I need you to contact. Without any warning, the door opened with a banging noise, and a big figure stood at the entrance of the room. Chapter 46, Ambush. Chapter 46, Ambush. Daphne gave out a frightened scream as she hurried to stand up from the couch. Harry cast a silent protego charm around them to block the pieces of wood that flew their way. So is Greengrass and Potter. Professor Nair looked somewhat troubled as he entered the room. Harry gave a quick glance at the parchment on the table, the circle with the professor's name was still inside his office and hadn't moved. The Indian professor caught this and grinned. I think I forgot to take the cloak where the tracking charm was placed. How careless of me. As I thought, he left the last one on purpose in order to find who was trying to keep an eye on him. Harry concluded. You two are some of my favorite students, it's a shame I have to kill you now. Kill us. Daphne was trembling like a leaf. Harry put a hand on her shoulder. Open the entrance in the fireplace and leave. But. Harry pushed her towards the back of the room. Go now. Daphne composed herself and nodded before turning around and running to the fireplace. The professor aimed his wand at her back and fired a red spell that Harry recognized as a stunner. He blocked it by manifesting a protego shield in front of her. The girl did not waste the opportunity. She opened the secret door and went inside. I'll call for help, Harry. She shouted as she was leaving. You can create a silent protego charm, and you can even cast it on others. You have really been holding back on my classes, haven't you, Mr. Potter? He gave another glance at the passageway Daphne used to escape. I'll deal with the lass a bit later. Let's start with you. He aimed his wand at Harry. You won't be able to catch her before she reaches Snape's office, Harry said. That passage leads to the dungeons and the exit is very close to the potion professor's office. That's too bad for you then, Severus and the rest of the professors are currently in a reunion. And the headmaster left this morning for a Wiesengamot meeting. The professor shrugged. So, no help will be coming. I'm sorry about this, I don't like killing children, but you shouldn't have stuck your nose in my business, Mr. Potter. So, no one is coming. Harry looked distracted. Professor Nair took this as him getting scared. A normal reaction for a child facing a ruthless assassin. I'll make it quick at least, Avada Kedavra. A piece of the door floated in front of Harry and exploded. What? The professor's eyes widened in shock. He had expected this fight to end with that one spell. That was a weak killing curse, you didn't put much effort into it, Harry commented before standing up from the couch. Nair took a step back by instinct before realizing what he was doing. There is something wrong with this kid. Why is he so calm now, the professor thought. You said before that no one was coming, right? No one can interrupt us and we can kill each other in peace. When Harry looked at Nair, a small smile appeared on his face. You know how frustrating it was? To play subterfuge, to track you around trying to collect some evidence without hurting anyone or breaking the law. I used to have other people to do those things for me. Harry seemed to be talking more to himself rather than the other man. Nair didn't understand what was wrong with him. He just wanted to end this quickly. Avada Kedavra. Another flash of green light flew to Harry. This time, a rock appeared out of nowhere in front of Harry and blocked the spell. Conjuration. Nair could not believe it, that was N.E.W.T level magic. The rock exploded and its pieces bounced off an invisible shield that he never even noticed Harry cast. He had also missed when Harry had taken out a second wand. I have to admit it, after practicing many fields of magic and studying hundreds of ancient tomes, I only have a talent for one thing when it comes to magic. Harry held both wands out in a peculiar way. He was only holding each wand between his index and heart fingers while keeping his palms open, almost like an orchestra director. He opened both arms out. I guess I should keep it down to legal spells by the ministry standard. I hope I do remember that list correctly. There was a lot of furniture in that room. Couches, chairs, tables, lamps. As soon as Harry moved his wands in a smooth pattern, every single piece of furniture inside the room was shot toward the front of the room where the professor was standing. Nair lifted the strongest shield he could muster and felt everything shaking as couches, tables and other objects impacted his shield at tremendous speeds and shattered in millions of pieces. After the assault ended, the professor looked in awe at the sheer destruction left behind. Had he not poured as much magic as he did to protect himself, he would have ended up being converted into a bloody mess of flesh and bones. What is this? Who are you really? Nair had met in the past some old wizards who used magical rituals to make themselves look very young and wondered if this was one of those. The person in front of him was certainly not a child. Harry looked at him and tilted his head sideways. You know who I am, I'm just Harry Potter, but never mind that. Now that the room is clean, we have more space for our duel. We can begin now. Begin. The professor blurted out. He had already thrown 2 killing curses at him and then was almost crushed to death by furniture. But for Harry that didn't even count as a warm-up. Chapter 47, Triple Casting Style. Chapter 47, Triple Casting Style. Omnia Mutatio. Harry said softly. The defense professor looked at him in perplexity. He had learned a very large amount of spells but had never heard of that one. By the wording, he could guess it was a transfiguration meant to create a change in the physical appearance, but he didn't observe any change in the boy. He did not have time to think longer. Harry aimed both wands at him, each one was going through different motions. And then he heard it. Expelliarmus. Petrificus totalis. Incarcerus. 2 flashes of light and a set of ghostly-looking chains were conjured in an instant. Professor Nair reacted swiftly and put up a shield that blocked the spells and moved away before it shattered, but he was welcomed with another barrage. Locomotor mortis. Densagio. Tarant legra. Expulso. Nair created a wave of condensed air to deflect the 3 curses that Harry threw at him. He recovered his balance and started at the young boy like he was some sort of monster. How are you doing it? How are you casting 3 spells at the same time? He was sure of it, he heard the distinctive voices every time Harry had performed his magic. Serpensortia. Arania. Scorpius. An entourage of venomous creatures appeared next to where he was standing. Two big green snakes hissed at him and lunged at his legs while spiders and scorpions walked more slowly towards his position. The room was big enough to have some freedom of movement. Unfortunately for him, all of the previous spells cast by Harry had been pushing him against a corner when he found himself unable to escape. Did he plan this far ahead? But he had no time to think about useless stuff. Conf Ringo. The head of one of the snakes blew up into pieces, but the other one was able to get on his side. Shit. Ah! The professor groaned in pain as the snake bit the lower part of his leg. Diffindo. He used the cutting charm to remove the head of the venomous creature. He had to pry open and manually detach the head of the snake from his leg. His limbs trembled, something likely caused by the venom he had been injected. His eyes moved to the rest of the dangerous creatures. They were only a few feet away from him. Incendi. Right as he was about to finish his fire jinx, the wooden floor came to life. He did not have to presume much about the cause of this. Harry used free transfiguration magic on the floor. He detached the wooden planks and used them as an improvised catapult to launch the assortment of venomous creatures at the professors. Several scorpions and spiders attached to his tunic as the muscular man did his best to rid of them. Meanwhile, Harry continues to cast spells on him. Locomotor Mortis. Incarcerus. Langlock. As always, they came in groups of 3. Making it incredibly difficult for the professor to defend himself. Luminous chains attached to Nayer's legs and caused him to fall. His tongue was twisted in an impossible manner, preventing him from uttering a single word while the small creatures continued their assault. Scorpions poked him on his hands and face while spiders got inside his robes and started to bite him with their venomous fangs. Keshav Nayer was a combat veteran who survived countless dangerous situations. He has battled against all sorts of wizards and witches and always came on top. But he knew that this was going to be his last battle. Even if the massive amount of venom didn't kill him, then the boy, no, the thing who was now walking towards him, was not going to let him live. As Harry got closer to him, he noticed something peculiar under the dim lighting of the room. There was something unusual on the palm of his hands. He could not make out what it was until Harry stopped, just a few feet away from where he was lying down. Nayer's eyes opened widely when he saw it. He finally understood how Harry managed to overwhelm his defenses by continuously casting 3 spells at a time. There were 2 disgusting human-looking mouths where the palms of his hands should be. This also explains why Harry was holding his wands in such a bizarre manner. He could not hold them normally as the wands would cover the mouths otherwise. That spell he cast at the beginning, something mutatio, he transformed his own body to be able to cast magic faster. No, is not that simple. Nayer considered. Just adding some extra mouths or arms on your body was not enough to start casting multiple spells at the same time. One's mind would need to keep up and form the spells. These require wand movements, chantings, and mental images. He wanted to ask him who he really was under that disguise. He wanted to know the real name of the wizard who had bested him, but he was unable to form words as he was suffering from the effects of the Langlock jinx. His body was starting to go stiff. Nayer had already lost complete control of his legs and his arms were going next. He knew he did not have much time left. I may not be able to win, but I can go with a bang. Nayer moved his shaky right arm forward, the grip on his wand was still firm as he pointed it at Harry who was now right in front of him. This was the best chance he was going to get. He could not make use of the killing curse as this was one of the few spells that were impossible to cast silently. But there was another very deadly magic he could use in this situation. Nayer focused everything in this spell. This was going to be the last time he performed magic and he wanted to at least take his opponent down with him. Dark flames formed before his wand, creating a sphere of fire that started to grow quickly. A hand made of rock emerged from between the wooden planks and closed on his wand hand, extinguishing the flames and crushing his hand along with his wand. Nayer let out a blood-curdling scream as his flesh and bones were torn apart. You really thought I was going to stand here and let you cast Fien fire? Harry gave his professor an incredulous look. It seems like I overestimated you, Professor Nayer. Anyways, let's end this. I still have to think where to hide your body. One more rock hand appeared beneath his head. Chapter 48, Explanations. Chapter 48, Explanations. Harry looked at the body of his dead professor. That was somewhat underwhelming, to think that it had me worried for a second. The fight with his defense professor had come at an unexpected time. He had hoped to at least be able to complete his magic storage artifacts so he would not have to worry about being magically exhausted. But in the end, he didn't even need to deplete half his magic reserves. All the spells he used were low cost, but still, it ended very fast. Famous hit wizard from India, and the best you could do is a couple of avadas and a half-assed excuse of fiend fire. He sighed. Fine, let's not waste time, Daphne could come back at any moment with the other professors. He first stored his official wand inside his robes. Harry then dispelled all the creatures he had summoned before using a shrinking charm on the corpse of the defense professor. After that, he levitated the body, which was now the size of a peanut, and hid it inside the fireplace's secret entrance. He had several days to find a more permanent location for the corpse, but for the moment it was safe there. Reparo. He pushed a lot of his remaining magic out, forming a clear image of the original state of room in his mind. Thousands of pieces of furniture start to fly around and join other pieces, forming back the couches, table, chandelier, and other decorations until everything was the same way it was before the fight. Harry nodded, satisfied with the result, then walked into the hall and locked the room. At the end of the hall was a big window with iron bars and a set of stairs that led down. That will have to do. He aimed his secondary wand at the window. Bombarda! With a loud explosion, the window bars, along with a big piece of the wall, were completely destroyed, leaving a gaping hole in its place. All that was left now was to wait. Daphne must have had a lot of trouble finding the professors, because it took almost 15 minutes before he finally heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Good thing my life wasn't actually in danger. Harry. Daphne and Professor McGonagall hurried to his side with Snape and Flitwick following behind. Mr. Potter, are you hurt? Miss Greengrass informed us about an attack. McGonagall examined him up and down. Harry looked down at himself. His robes were completely clean and he didn't even have a scratch on his body. He did consider causing a few injuries on himself while telling the tale that he was able to repel the stack of the professor long enough for him to give up and escape. But sounded too ridiculous. No one was going to believe that a first-year student could duel against a veteran hit wizard for more than 2 seconds without dying in the process. The only combat spell he is supposed to know is the Flipendo, and that can take you so far. It was better to make a different claim. He didn't hurt me, Professor. He said that his only target was Neville and he didn't want to hurt anyone else. Then he ran away. Harry pointed at the hole in the wall at the end of the corridor. McGonagall and Flitwick gasped. By Merlin, was it really Professor Nair? Asked the small teacher. Yes, Professor Flitwick. It was definitely him. Daphne can corroborate this, assured Harry. And the alleged assassin ran away without attacking you at all? No, even once. That seems very incredible, Mr. Potter. Asked Snape. Would I be alive if he wanted me dead, Professor Snape? Harry retorted. Humph. That was all Snape said before approaching the broken window and examining the scene. Why don't I take you two to the headmaster's office? I can call him from there and we can wait for him while drinking some tea, yes? Suggested McGonagall. I will call the Aurors too. And I think we should notify their parents, correct? Said Flitwick. McGonagall hesitated for a moment. She knew how little Dumbledore liked to involve the Aurors in Hogwarts matters, especially since they had recently been called by the awful affair with the Acromantulas. But she also knew that it was inevitable to have the Auror and parents involved. Both children were from pure-blood families and Harry's father was a head Auror. Yes, please do so. McGonagall had no choice in this, surely the headmaster will understand. They arrived at the headmaster's office and we were told to sit down in front of Dumbledore's desk. A house elf brought them some hot cocoa while McGonagall went to call the headmaster using the Floo network. Daphne kept stealing glances at him. He knew what she wanted to say. She didn't buy the story that Harry had told. After all, she was there when the professor had promised to kill both of them for knowing too much about his intentions. However, she was smart enough to keep her mouth shut in front of the other professors after hearing Harry. He looked at her and their eyes met. Not now, tell you later, he promised her in a whisper, and she moved her head. She now looked satisfied enough, so she started to drink her cocoa in peace. A few minutes later, McGonagall came back to inform them that the headmaster was going to be here shortly and that he requested that we wait for him. Then Professor Flitwick came back and also said that both our parents and a squad of Aurors were on their way to Hogwarts at this moment. Harry grimaced. This is going to be a very long day, you better be grateful, Neville. Chapter 49, Mistrust. Chapter 49, Mistrust. A team of Aurors, along with James Potter, arrived at Hogwarts, followed by Dumbledore, just a few minutes later. It was almost midnight when things finally calmed down a bit. Daphne did a good job of avoiding any details that would contradict his story of how the teacher ran away after being found out. The Auror team got all the information they could from the 2 eyewitnesses before leaving. Snape then escorted Daphne to her dorm, leaving Harry alone with his father and Dumbledore. The headmaster did not seem satisfied with Harry's explanation and had tried to use the legilimency twice on him. Harry avoided eye contact with the headmaster but still felt a familiar sensation of an intrusion attempt. Luckily, Dumbledore was only trying to feel his surface thoughts and was not trying to dig deeper, otherwise, the existence of his occlumency shield would be revealed to the old man. What Harry found surprising was the fact that the headmaster dared to do this much in front of his father. "I'm taking him home for a few days," said James. "Is this really necessary? Harry is completely fine. And we don't need this to gain more attention among the students." Dumbledore was very insistent with Daphne and Harry that today's events must be kept a secret for now. Harry could agree on that. There was no need to cause mass panic. And they will never be able to connect Nair with Lucius Malloy anyway. "I'll have to do something about that, myself. I'm sorry Albus, but this is not negotiable." "Do you have any idea how difficult it was to convince Lily to stay at home and wait?" answered James. "He'll come back in a few days after things calm down a bit." Dumbledore sighed and looked at Harry again. "Very well, James. Have him back in a few days. I'll come up with some excuse for his absence." James glanced at Harry and this one noticed something odd on his father's eyes. It was only there for a moment before disappearing. "Let's go home, son. Your mother can't wait to see you." Harry took his father's hand and let himself be guided to the fireplace. "You remember how to use flow powder, right? The code is Potter Manor." Harry nodded and took some of the flow powder in his hands. "Potter Manor." Harry disappeared in a burst of green fire. When he came out of the fireplace, he found himself in an unfamiliar place. He was expecting to arrive at the main hall of the manor, but instead, he was in a spacious but empty room, surrounded by brick walls and only a handful of candles to serve as illumination. He heard the fireplace ignite behind him. "What is this room?" Harry asked. "Potter Manor is a fake entry that leads to an underground security room beneath the manor. The real entry is Marauder's Nest. My real son has never traveled by flow powder, so he had no way of knowing it." "Who are you?" Harry turned around and saw his father pointing a wand at him. "Was my story that bad?" he said, keeping his calm despite the situation. "No, it was believable. But I found evidence of a fight in a nearby room. There was residual magic corresponding with a cast of the killing curse and also signs of a recent reparo charm being used on the furniture." Harry knitted his eyebrows. He didn't know about these detection methods. Moody never explained them to him, they mostly focused on fighting and survival magic. He had wanted to join the Aurors in the past, but the war started again before he had the chance. Now he had to think about what to do next. If it came to it, he was fairly confident in defeating his father. But he would lose his family if he did that. What would be the point of this second chance then? Can I trust him with the truth, or at least some of it? But if he couldn't trust his family, who could he trust then? It has become quite evident that hiding his abilities and intentions is going to backfire. He was sure that his father was not the only one suspicious about him. But Albus Dumbledore is going to be more subtle about it than James Potter. "What happened to my son?" James asked. As much as he wanted to hide his emotions, his eyes betrayed him. "Answer me." "I am your son," said Harry. "My son would never have survived a fight with a veteran hit wizard. I never gave him any training either. I did try, but he hated to study any form of magic, he couldn't even." There was something else James wanted to add but decided not to. "You are right, I am not the son you remember or the son you raised in this house. But I am who I claim to be. I can prove it," offered Harry. James frowned and kept his wand in place. "So you claim to be my son, but not the one I raised? Since I am sure I only had one son, what are you claiming to be, a time traveler or something ridiculous like that?" James said. "No, is even more ridiculous than that," Harry thought. "Why don't I start by proving my identity? May I take my wand out? A magical oath." James guessed his intentions. "Fine, but no sudden moves." Harry did as told. He removed his ebony wand from his robes, leaving the other one inside his holster. He held the wand out for James to see. His father nodded. Go on. Harry made a smooth wave with his wand. I swear on my life and magic that I am Harry James Potter, son of James Potter and Lily Potter née Evans, so mought be. James's eyes opened like plates as he saw a flash of light, confirming the oath was complete. Impossible. Chapter 50, The Truth. Chapter 50, The Truth. Right, I'm supposed to cast a spell now. Harry gave his wand a flick and in turn, James' wand was ripped from his hand and flew onto Harry's. James' shock was replaced by a wave of uneasiness as he felt his wand missing. Harry noticed the look his father was giving him but paid it no mind. He walked towards James and returned the wand to its owner. James took it with some hesitation. I have proven that I am who I claim to be and that I have no hostile intentions towards you or the rest of my family, what else would it take to convince you? Asked Harry. Must I take a blood pact? He added. No. James was quick to say. Those things are extremely dangerous. People have died for the minor of mistakes. Fine then, what else? James remained silent for a moment. What happened to you? I came from a future, a distant one, many years from now. He tried to choose his words carefully in order to reveal as little as possible. You come from the future, distant travel to the past is, wait. James recalled something important. This is not how time travel works, even if you did somehow manage to travel to a distant past, you would still be in your own body. True. But I doubt this was normal time travel, after all, I died. You died? James cried. Yes, I died, and then I woke up in my 10-year-old body. No memories of any childhood before that. He avoided mentioning that the future he came from was from a completely different timeline. And before you ask, no, I don't know how it happened or why I'm here. I was as confused back then as you are now. The day that you woke up in the hospital, after the incident. You were acting very strange and you had amnesia but the doctor said it was normal, that was you then. James looked at him. Harry nodded. I didn't want to deceive you and Mom, but I didn't know how you were going to react if I suddenly started talking about time travel and stuff like that. When the doctor talked about the amnesia, I just took advantage of that opportunity. And considering your reaction. Harry's eyes moved to the wand that was still being highly held by James. His father noticed this and stored the wand back in its holster. But by the posture, Harry could tell he wasn't completely relaxed. Wait, you said you died before. How did that happen? James asked. Voldemort, he comes back, there is a very long war, most died, even me. Is best if I avoid telling you too many details about the future. So me and Lily also. James said solemnly. Yes, very early. And even Lyra and Holly too. James asked with dread. Harry chose to remain silent. He hated having to lie to his father. James took Harry's silence as a yes. My little girls. I can make another oath if you don't believe me. Harry offered. After all, the things he said were technically true. He just omitted some information. Although he would prefer to avoid another oath, no matter what, there were always some risks. No, you don't need to do that, Harry. James looked somewhat regretful. Sorry for doubting you, son. Thanks, Dad. So, what are we doing now? We should tell your mother. We cannot hide this from her. Said James. Harry nodded. She deserves to know, I supposed. How do you think she is going to take it? Probably better than me, don't worry too much about it. Oh, before we go, there is something else I need to know. Is this about the missing professor? Asked Harry. James nodded. I would like to know what truly happened. Harry explained to his father about the information discovered by Lord Greengrass and how Professor Nair was hired by Lucius Malfoy. He then talked about his meetings with Daphne during the year and how the professor found them. Some of those things, James already knew, but there were many details that he and Daphne had avoided telling to the Aurors and headmaster. So you thought it was a good idea to put tracking charms on a veteran hit wizard? Did I not teach you any better? Tracking charms, even the best ones, are not that hard to detect. And any decent assassin is going to be an expert at avoiding being tracked down. Yes, well, I have no excuse. Let's move on. Harry could only blame this mistake on his lack of experience in this type of war. So, What happened next? I know he didn't just run away without a fight. Oh, I killed him and hid the body. You don't have to worry about finding him. Harry did consider hiding that bit of information, but there was no advantage to it. It was just a matter of time before his father discovered that Professor Nair was no longer alive. And then, what little trust Harry had managed to acquire so far, will be completely shattered. His father will never trust him again after that. And if he had learned something from today's events was that, he could not do this alone. In his past life, he had many friends and companions who helped along the way. Without them, he would never have survived long enough to destroy Voldemort. He had been too naive to think he could do everything by himself. You killed him? James gave him an incredulous look. Harry nodded. I told you that I lived through a war, remember? Don't be that surprised by those things. How can I not be surprised when my 11-year-old son tells me he just killed someone? It was self-defense thought. Harry explained. Okay. James calmed a bit. When we tell your mother, we are skipping this part. Remember to comment, vote, and / or leave a review if you have the time. Those things help me a lot and I would really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.